Chapter 382, Legend of the Saber Emperor. Chapter 382, Legend of the Saber Emperor. Each time cultivators of the Great Zhou dynasty entered the ancient battlefield, they would only linger around the borders. How could they have heard of the Saber Mountain Spirit Sea? If it was not because Xuantian had brought Xuantian and the others to this place, they might never have known about Xuantian City, nor would they have the chance to interact with large sects such as Elixir Yang Sect and Glass Palace in their entire lives. Experiences as such were rare and precious, serving as eye-openers. Xuantian never had any feuds with Yin Jun. However, the latter had been unfriendly to him right from the beginning, shooting sarcastic remarks whenever he had the chance. As for the exact reason, Xuantian had a vague guess. However, this was a cultivator of Elixir Yang Sect's battle hall, after all, and Xuantian was not bothered since Yin Jun had yet to cross his bottom line. Tang Yu frowned gently and shot Yin Jun a stern look before saying slowly, "The reason why the Saber Mountain Spirit Sea is so famous is because of an old legend related to it." Through her tone, it was obvious that the legend was far from simple. Xuantian's group looked serious as they sat upright and listened intently. Tang Yu said slowly, "The legend of the Saber Emperor." The Saber Emperor? The moment those two words were said, the void trembled, as if a pitch-dark crevasse had been opened up, sending a chilling gust of wind forth. The mere mention of those words brought forth an indescribable pressure. It was ancient, as though it had crossed through the archaic times with an indestructible intent that was shocking. Instantly, a killing intent filled the hall. Everyone felt as if it had become much more difficult to breathe. It took a long while before the sensation dispersed. Tang Yu took a deep breath and said, "The Emperor represents invincibility, superiority, and uniqueness. He is invincible in the way of the saber with no one that can surpass him, hence the title of the Saber Emperor." While the Saber Emperor may not have been the strongest person in Tianhuang mainland, he was the one and only emperor in the way of the saber among all the saber cultivators. Xuantian understood. In any given era, there could be many emperors. However, in any particular domain or path, there could only be a single emperor. That was the definition of emperor: invincible, supreme, and unique. The emperor of the path of immortality was the immortal emperor. The emperor of the fiend path was the fiend emperor. The emperor of the way of the sword was the sword emperor. Following that line of deduction, those that become emperors must naturally be among the strongest cultivators of Tianhuang mainland. I believe all of you know that the sword reigns supreme in the current Tianhuang mainland, and the most common weapon of choice for immortal cultivators are flying swords. However, back in the ancient era, there were 100 weapon classes that fought for supremacy. Apart from swords, there were sabers, spears, halberds, axes, bows, and many other weapons. The sword had its own way, and so did the saber. There was an emperor for every type of weapon. However, in the ancient era, the human race was blessed with immense luck and gave birth to countless paragons in Tianhuang mainland, giving rise to multiple emperors. That was a golden era for us humans, and we waged a historic war against the other races known as the Ancient War. The war lasted for a long time, and countless human experts and ancient mighty figures fell. The emperors were all tainted with blood, and it was extremely tragic. Although we humans stood victorious after the war, most of the 100 weapon techniques were lost in the ancient battlefield with no future left in sight. The only remaining lineages were the ways of the sword and saber. Xuantian and the rest were shocked when they heard that. They had never heard of these ancient tales and legends. Right now, they were greatly intrigued. Even though it was only a few short descriptions, everyone could almost envision that magnificent era before their eyes. In fact, Xuantian had an urge to go against the tides of time and follow in the footsteps of his predecessors to witness that glorious history. Tang Yu continued, "The reason why those two heritages could be passed down from the ancient war was naturally attributed to two people, the Sword Emperor and the Saber Emperor. There are way too many legends regarding these two mighty figures. Some describe them as mortal enemies, some describe them as bosom buddies, and there were even some who said that they were neither friends nor foes, merely appreciative of the other's talents. No matter what, The final outcome was that the Saber Emperor went far away and left Tianhuang mainland. Thereafter, there were no emperors for all the other weapons, and only the way of the sword reigned supreme, leading to the current state of the cultivation world. Su Zimo's group let out a long breath, unable to calm down for a long time. It was only now that they understood why most of the cultivators in the cultivation world used flying swords instead of flying sabers and other weapons. So, this was the reason. Tang Yu said, "The legacy that the Sword Emperor left behind back then is the current Sword Sect, one of the 9 immortal sects." Su Zimo was secretly impressed. Originally, he thought that super sects such as the 9 immortal sects, 7 fiend sects, and 6 Buddhist monasteries only earned their title as the strongest factions of Tianhuang mainland due to their ancient lineage and strong foundations. But judging from the situation now, all of those sects had shocking backgrounds. For example, of the 9 immortal sects, Sword Sect's founder master was the Sword Emperor of the ancient times. In fact, he was someone that influenced the future of the world, such that the way of the sword was supreme in the current cultivation world. After a moment of silence, Su Zimo suddenly asked, "Where did the Saber Emperor go?" Tang Yu smiled faintly. He traveled far overseas and found a lone island in the ocean, leaving his legacy there. Su Zimo's heart skipped a beat as he blurted, "One of the 2 islands?" The top factions of Tianhuang mainland consisted of the 9 immortal sects, 8 demon races, 7 fiend sects, 6 Buddhist monasteries, 5 heretical doctrines, 4 unorthodox groups, 3 aristocrat families, 2 islands, and 1 palace. "That's right." Tang Yu's eyes flickered with a hint of admiration as she nodded. The legacy left behind by the Saber Emperor is one of the 2 islands, Divine Phoenix Island. The successor of Divine Phoenix Island rarely steps foot onto Tianhuang mainland. However, each time one of them does, they would definitely be unrivaled paragons that are bound to create waves in the cultivation world. Su Zimo lamented. From this perspective, the Saber Emperor did not lose back then. The legacy left behind by the Sword Emperor is one of the immortal sects, and the legacy left behind by the Saber Emperor is one of the 2 islands. In terms of reputation, status, or strength, the island is not weaker than Sword Sect. What does the Saber Mountain Spirit Sea have to do with the Saber Emperor then? Su Zimo asked. Tang Yu explained, "It's said that when the Saber Emperor left Tianhuang mainland, he left behind a legacy, the Saber Mountain Spirit Sea in the ancient battlefield. While the Saber Mountain Spirit Sea truly exists, there has never been any cultivator who has obtained its inheritance for thousands of years. Countless paragons have been produced in this period of time, but all of them ended in failure. Gradually, the Saber Mountain Spirit Sea became a legend that no one believed in, until..." With a slight pause, Tang Yu continued, "Around 1,000 years ago, a monstrous cultivator appeared in the ancient battlefield. Although he was not from one of the super sects, he had frightening combat strength and could compete against all the legacy disciples of the various major sects. It was said that the person managed to obtain the Saber Emperors in the Saber Mountain Spirit Sea." Su Zimo frowned slightly and asked, "The Saber Mountain Spirit Sea still exists after that person obtained the Saber Emperor's inheritance?" "I don't know the exact reasons why, but it indeed still exists." Tang Yu nodded. "You're considered as a saber cultivator as well, and the Saber Mountain Spirit Sea is suitable for you and can help your strength grow rapidly. Naturally, there's a prerequisite, and that is for you to obtain the inheritance of the Saber Emperor." Chapter 383, Standing Shoulder to Shoulder with the Emperors. Chapter 383, Standing Shoulder to Shoulder with the Emperors. Upon hearing that, Su Zimo had already made up his mind that he wanted to make a trip to the Saber Mountain Spirit Sea. Even though Su Zimo had made use of sabers up till this point of his cultivation, he knew nothing about saber techniques. He merely relied on the power of his bloodline as well as his physique strength to slash widely. Thankfully, he cultivated the mystic classic of the 12 demon kings of the great wilderness, making his skin coarse and flesh thick. Agile as an ape, he could pounce like a tiger, sprint like a horse, rise like the wind, land like an arrow, and be tough and nimble at the same time. Coupled with the assistance of his spirit perception, He could evade danger without even seeing it, and thus, it was quite rare for him to be disadvantaged. However, Su Zimo knew very well that if he were to meet a top-notch expert, his opponent would be able to easily find the openings of his saber technique and take him down, even if the latter's strength could not match his. Therefore, even if there was only a 1 in a million chance, Su Zimo wanted to head over and give it a shot. When he saw that Su Zimo was moved, Yin Jun sneered at the side. There have been countless cultivators who have been to the Saber Mountain Spirit Sea before. Many of them were paragons that were far beyond their contemporaries. However, there has only been a single person who has managed to succeed through the thousands of years. Does a country bumpkin such as yourself who have never even heard of the Saber Mountain Spirit Sea think that you are befitting of receiving the Saber Emperor's inheritance? Tang Yu was already displeased at how Yin Jun was targeting Su Zimo repeatedly. It was only after she noticed that Su Zimo was calm and had no reaction that she became slightly relieved. Also, there's one more thing I have to remind you about. Tang Yu said deeply, I don't know much about the Saber Mountain Spirits either. After all, there has already been someone who received the Saber Emperor's inheritance 1,000 years ago. As such, you might end up making a wasted trip. It's all right. Su Zimo smiled calmly. The many legends that you've told me about are truly fascinating. In the ancient war, dragons and snakes rose together with the emperors in that golden era. The only regret I have is that I wasn't born back then to stand shoulder to shoulder with those emperors, leaving my name through history. The moment he said that, the hall went silent. Everyone watched with shock and slightly agape mouths. The verve of this man. How much verve was required for him to state that he wanted to leave his name through history by standing shoulder to shoulder with those emperors? The fact that such a statement was said by a Foundation establishment cultivator was truly ridiculous and arrogant. For some unknown reason, Su Zimo was not filled with passion or unparalleled pride when he said those words, merely looking extremely natural. However, it felt as though the green-robed cultivator before them was truly qualified to stand shoulder to shoulder with those emperors. Even Yin Jun, who had a grudge against Su Zimo, could not spout out a single sarcastic remark at this moment. He wouldn't have dared to repeat Su Zimo's statement personally, worried that bad luck might befall him from the unknowns. Even for the emperors that have fallen for countless years, their dignities could not be sullied. Uncle Liang looked at Su Zimo deeply. Initially, he had underestimated Su Zimo. However, at that moment, Uncle Liang's previous impression of Su Zimo disappeared entirely. Su Zimo did not notice the strange expressions of everyone around him, merely immersed in his own emotions. Shaking his head gently, he lamented, "Time is merciless through history. Be it the Sword Emperor or the Saber Emperor, both have already passed on along with those eras, leaving only their legends. Since there's no longer a chance to witness the majesty of the Saber Emperor, I might as well head out to the Saber Mountain Spirit Sea. Even if I can't obtain the inheritance, I can relive the glory of the past in the ruins to make up for the regrets in my heart." Tang Yu nodded. "Since you have already decided, I won't stop you. However, you have to return to Xuantian City within the month to help us contend for the Elixir Pool Sect ruins." "All right." Su Zimo nodded. Right then, a cultivator of Elixir Yang Sect strode in quickly and greeted with cupped fists. "Young Master, Feng Man of Thousand Crane Sect, requests an audience." "Sister Man?" Tang Yu pondered for a moment and shifted her gaze. It paused on Long Row for a brief moment before she nodded. "Invite her in," she explained to Su Zimo's group. The four unorthodox groups have a pretty good relationship. Sister Man is the commander for Thousand Crane Sect's expedition this time round, and I've known her for many years. Right then, a woman in a long white robe strode over. With a curvy and voluptuous figure, her steps were nimble and her black silky hair was tied in a bun, exuding a mature and dignified aura. Her features were exquisite and very beautiful. On the woman's waist, apart from a storage bag, there was a pink paper crane that was really pretty tied to it. Tang Yu walked over and smiled. "Sister Man, come on in." Feng Man glanced at Tang Yu and chuckled. "Why are you still dressed like this?" You're no longer young. I'm used to it, Tang Yu blinked. Xiaoyu, I'm not going to beat around the bush. I'm here for someone. Feng Man did not waste time with any small talk. For her. Tang Yu glanced at Lung Ro. Feng Man smiled. I can't keep anything from you. Me? Lung Ro was slightly stunned. Feng Man nodded with a gentle gaze. I can see your talent in talisman crafting and can't bear to bury it, so I'm here to invite you to join Thousand Crane Sect. What do you think? Lung Ro loved crafting talismans and indeed wanted to join Thousand Crane Sect. However, she did not expect the latter to come knocking. Furthermore, she could tell that this Thousand Crane Sect cultivator was truly sincere. Right then, another Elixir Yang Sect cultivator headed in and greeted with cupped fists. Ing Zhe of Puppet Sect requests an audience. One of the 5 heretical doctrines, Puppet Sect. Let him in. Tang Yu raised her head. Not long later, a muscular man strode into the hall wearing linen clothes. He had short hair and looked honest, grinning with cupped fists the moment he entered. Greetings, fellow Taoists. Tang Yu whispered to Su Zimo. This man is Ing Zhe, the commander of Puppet Sect for this expedition. Su Zimo nodded. Young Master Tang, I'm here today because I wish to invite someone to join our Puppet Sect. I wonder if that's all right. Ing Zhe went straight to the point. Oh. Tang Yu smiled and asked, who was the one who caught your eye? Ing Zhe pointed to Jian, who was drinking tea dully at the side. Him. Jian was confused and looked dazed, not understanding how he was chosen. Ing Zhe grinned. This silly fool is not bad. He suits my taste. Ha 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 ha. Little Fatty could not help but burst into laughter. Jian clenched his fists with a darkened expression and emphasized, I'm not silly. I'm merely honest. Yes? Ing Zhe nodded and added after a slight pause, they're both the same thing. Jian. Little Fatty laughed even more merrily. Xuantian of Tomb Sect requests an audience. One of the 5 heretical doctrines, Tomb Sect. Let him in. Before long, a pale-faced cultivator entered the hall. He had a monkey-like mouth and his eyes darted around, lighting up when they caught sight of Little Fatty. Xuantian blinked repeatedly towards Little Fatty. Curious, Little Fatty leaned over. The two of them, one fat and the other skinny, ran to a corner and mumbled. Little Fatty nodded repeatedly with burning eyes and smacked his lips like a starving wolf. When he saw that, Su Zimo smiled gently. He felt happy for Long Ro and the others. Su Zimo was not the only one who made a name for himself and was recognized by many other cultivators in that battle on the Long Street. The other 4 were as well. When they made the decision to return to Xuantian City, it was with the understanding that they would meet with a great disaster and die. Who would have thought that it would have turned into a great opportunity for them today instead? Fortune and misfortune were interdependent, and it was nothing more than the cycle of karma. Chapter 384, Hunted by 2 Sects. Chapter 384, Hunted by 2 Sects. Lung Ro and the others looked towards Su Zimo instinctively. Although this opportunity was earned by them fighting on the Long Street, most importantly, it was because of Su Zimo. If not for Su Zimo, they would have died long before they could even reach Xuantian City. Su Zimo smiled and nodded. Be it Thousand Crane Sect or Puppet Sect and Tomb Sect who appeared later on, the people who came were all the commanders of this expedition, the legacy disciples of the various sections. That alone was enough to tell of their sincerity. Since we're all in Xuantian City, we can meet one another at any time. Little Fatty was thoroughly engrossed in chatting with Xuantian from Tomb Sect and bid farewell with that remark. I'll be leaving too. Jian scratched his head and left the hall behind Ing Zhe of Puppet Sect. Lung Ro nodded to Su Zimo as a form of greeting and left with Feng Man of Thousand Crane Sect. Tang Yu looked towards Xuantian and blinked, saying in a playful tone, seems like I've got to extend my invitation right now, or you'll be poached away by the other sections. If you don't mind, I'm willing to join Elixir Yang Sect, Xuantian replied with a smile. Tang Yu shifted her gaze towards Su Zimo and asked expectantly, what about you? Although Su Zimo agreed to assist Elixir Yang sect to contend for the Elixir Pool sect ruins, he did not mention anything about joining the sect. I'm different from them. Su Zimo shook his head and did not explain further, declining tactfully. Even though she expected that, Tang Yu could not help but feel disappointed when she heard his reply. Su Zimo cupped his fists. There's no time to waste. I'll head out to the Saber Mountain Spirit Sea right now and try to return earlier. Be careful, Tang Yu reminded. Turning around, Su Zimo disappeared before everyone's eyes swiftly. This was the first time that Su Zimo had shown his face in Xuantian City after that battle on the Long Street 10 days ago. Instantly, he attracted countless stares. Some were in awe, some in envy, some curious. Did you see that? That scholarly green-robed cultivator is Su Zimo. Oh, that's him? I thought he was going to have multiple limbs and heads. There were cultivators in Xuantian City who hadn't seen Su Zimo before. However, there were few who have not heard of his name. Walking on the long street, Su Zimo could hear discussions coming from a few streets away with a mere twitch of his ears. He was not bothered about such stuff. However, before he walked far, his heart skipped a beat. He sensed a fleeting killing intent from those strange gazes. Was it a survivor of the 4 mounted bandits? Or, the trees wanted silence, but the wind did not stop. To think that someone would be harboring designs on him even after that bloody battle on the long street. Su Zimo maintained his composure and sneered in his heart, walking towards the east gate of Xuantian City. The killing intent followed him the entire time. Not long after he exited the city, Su Zimo sensed another killing intent on top of the first. He was neither fast nor slow in his speed. About 2 hours later, Su Zimo was already far from Xuantian City, and his surroundings were empty with no one around. Right then, the sound of clothes flapping could be heard from behind. Su Zimo stopped in his tracks and turned around. In the distant horizon, 2 figures were flying through the air at an extremely fast speed with a murderous aura. Narrowing his gaze, he focused on the sect badges around their waists and scoffed coldly while muttering softly, "It's indeed them." In the bloody battle on the long street, Su Zimo killed 2 7 Meridian Foundation establishment cultivators. Although it was because he took advantage of the circumstances, ordinary cultivators wouldn't dare to provoke him either. Furthermore, he had the backing of Elixir Yang sect. However, there were 2 sects in Xuantian City who had sufficient strength and reason to cause trouble for him: Glass Palace of the Immortal Sects and Malevolent Earth sect of the Fiend Sects. He had rejected Pei Chunyu and Xuantian and embarrassed them in front of everyone the other day. Given their status, there was no way they were going to let things go. Naturally, Glass Palace and Malevolent Earth sect could not strike when Su Zimo was an Elixir Yang sect. However, cultivators of the 2 sects chased after him the moment he was out of the city. Both Glass Palace and Malevolent Earth sect had only sent a single person each. This was clear proof of how strong these 2 were. In reality, if Tang Yu was here, she would have been able to recognize the 2 of them. The cultivator from Glass Palace was Lu Yun, and the one from Malevolent Earth sect was Di Xing. At 7 Meridian Foundation establishment, both of them were the right-hand men of Pei Chunyu and Xuantian and possessed terrifying strength. In the blink of an eye, Lu Yun and Di Xing had already arrived in front of him. They stood in midair on their flying swords, looking down at Su Zimo from left and right. Fu. Lu Yun chuckled lightly with a mocking gaze. Su Zimo, why aren't you running? Are you prepared to surrender since you know there's no way you can run? Di Xing's gaze was ice-cold. Su Zimo smiled. If he activated his bloodline and deployed Divine Steed Fleeting at full speed, these 2 wouldn't be able to catch up to him. The 2 of them descended slowly from midair, maintaining a fixed distance, and were cautious of one another. Lu Yun was the first to speak as he pointed to Su Zimo and said to Di Xing, "Fellow Taoist, let's put it bluntly. The moment this man is dead, we'll split the treasures in his storage bag evenly." "No problem," Di Xing nodded. Rolling his eyes, Lu Yun continued, "I want the long blood-red saber in his possession. If that's the case, I'll take the gigantic moon-white bow, Dixing replied. The two of them were referring to the perfect spirit weapon, Blood Quencher, and the quasi-connate spirit weapon, Moon Concealment Bow. Neither of them took Su Zimo seriously and were already discussing how they should split his belongings. Su Zimo's eyes flashed with mockery as he shook his head slightly. Immortals and fiends were different. Since the ancient times, the duty of an immortal has always been to exterminate demons and slay fiends. But now, what difference did the immortal sect cultivator before him have with those of the fiend sects? What are you guys doing? Su Zimo asked indifferently. Oh, I almost forgot about you. Senior Brother Pei has a message for you. Turning around, Lu Yun let out a creepy smile and said slowly, anyone I wish to kill will definitely die. Dixing's gaze was cold as he said maliciously, allowing you a chance to be Senior Brother Shue's guard was an honor for you. Since you don't want it, prepare to die. Fu. Su Zimo laughed and asked, why didn't Pei Chunyu and Shui Yang come themselves if they wanted my life? There's no need to use a sledgehammer just to crack a nut. Dixing's expression was filled with disdain. Lu Yun sneered, why does Senior Brother Pei have to deal with a nobody like you personally? Ha ha ha. Su Zimo laughed into the skies. His laughter was deafening, shaking the void like a great bell. Lu Yun and Dixing felt a slight, stinging pain in their ears. Suddenly, Su Zimo stopped laughing. His eyes were bright and filled with killing intent as he shouted, the likes of you two actually think that you can have my life? Su Zimo, you're too arrogant. You think that you are fit to challenge me just because you've killed people like Hu Ming and Chai Li? As a disciple of Glass Palace, Lu Yun was fearless as he took a deep breath and channeled spirit energy. Instantly, 7 spirit meridians shone beneath his robes and rumbled furiously with a mighty aura. There's no need to say anything else. Die. Su Zimo strode forward and whipped out Blood Quencher with a backhand. The blood beam expanded and enveloped Lu Yun and Dixing. Chapter 385, Troublesome. Chapter 385, Troublesome. Whoosh. Su Zimo channeled his bloodline and his bones and tendons sounded together, rumbling with the sound of tsunami alongside thunder cracking. 5 spirit lights shone on Blood Quencher and burst forth into a blinding radiance, akin to a blazing blood-colored sun. It shot through the void with a sharp edge. The power of that slash was extremely strong, and it was fast. Any other ordinary cultivator, even if they were at 7 Meridian Foundation establishment, would have been shocked. However, Lu Yun and Dixing were unimpressed, and they even had mocking expressions. Let the body be like glass, transparent inside out and cleansed of impurities, turning indestructible. Lu Yun stood on the spot and chanted the mantra. Each time he said a single word, his body's aura would change slightly. Until the end, Lu Yun's muscles seemed like they were veiled with a mysterious luster, bright as glass and without flaws and impurities. At the same time, Lu Yun's arms shone with 4 spirit lights. It was a pair of braces, a supreme-grade spirit weapon. Glass Palace specialized in body tempering, and if one cultivated the sect's secret manual, the Glass Heart Sutra to its max, their body, eyes, and heart would be like glass. They would be indestructible, flawless, undying, immensely strong, and could fight against ferocious beasts with their bare hands. Therefore, cultivators of Glass Palace mostly used weapons such as gloves or bracers. Although bracers were rarely seen nowadays, they were one of the 100 weapon classes back in the ancient era and were not to be underestimated. Bracers were extremely flexible and when equipped on one's arms, could be used both defensively and offensively, allowing one use their arms like their fingers. Swiftly, Lu Yun neither retreated nor dodged. He buckled his knees slightly, shifting his center of gravity downwards as he propped up his arms to receive the incoming Blood Quencher. Clang! The sound of metal clashing rang. Lu Yun's figure turned shorter as his feet sank deep into the ground. However, he was not pushed backwards, nor did his expression change. As for Blood Quencher, it rebounded highly against the tremendous force. Su Zimo narrowed his eyes and his heart skipped a beat. On the surface, this was an even exchange. But in reality, he took the initiative and his blood quencher was a grade higher than Lu Yun's bracers. Yet, he did not gain any advantage despite such circumstances. This is a tough nut to crack. Su Zimo realized that he might not be able to kill this person quickly and could not help but shift his gaze towards Di Xing, who was not far away. After that slash, Su Zimo used the remaining momentum of Blood Quencher as it was repelled to redirect towards Di Xing of Malevolent Earth sect at the side. The blood beam was blinding with a nauseating smell. A few years ago, deep underground, Su Zimo dealt with some of the Fiend heirs before and had some understanding towards the Fiend sections. Among the Fiend sects, Overlord Palace was the strongest in body tempering, followed by Zenith sect. The physique of Malevolent Earth sect's Fiend heir was not strong. Su Zimo wanted to make use of a ferocious burst attack to kill Di Xing first before dealing wholeheartedly with Lu Yun later on. Hee. As though he had sensed Su Zimo's killing intent long ago, Di Xing let out an odd chuckle and 7 spirit meridians shone on his body. Spirit energy surged as he opened his mouth, spitting out a black smoke that gushed in an illusory and malefic manner. Although he had yet to clear his eye orifices, Su Zimo's vision was extremely strong due to his daily cultivation of the mystic classic of the 12 demon kings of the great wilderness. But now, he felt his vision go black against the black fog. In that moment of daze, he lost track of Di Xing. Blood Quencher seemed to have entered a quagmire in this mass of malefic energy and could barely be moved. The malefic energy enveloped and corroded the blade, causing its spirit light to dim while the blood beam on the blade showed signs of weakening. Humph! Su Zimo harumphed and held Blood Quencher horizontally across his chest. Channeling his bloodline, a ball of blazing lightning appeared in his palm, and he swiped it across Blood Quencher. The power of thunder was the most masculine and could purge off evil. It was the most effective against such malefic energy. With a series of crackling sounds, the malefic energy around Blood Quencher was completely purged by the ball of lightning in Su Zimo's palm. 5 spirit patterns shone on the blade once more as it regained its luster. Lightning. Di Xing's eyes flashed with caution. In reality, the smoke that he had spat out was far from simple. It was one of Malevolent Earth sect's secret skills, Spirit Devouring Malefice. The Spirit Devouring Malefice was extremely strong and was used to corrode spirit weapons. Any spirit weapon that was tainted by the Spirit Devouring Malefice would have its spirit chi sucked away. Left unpurged, even its spirit patterns would be erased, rendering the spirit weapons almost useless. Swoosh! Lu Yun charged over from the side with his bloodline rumbling like lead mercury. A fierce wind blew behind him as he swung his arms and smashed down. Su Zimo took a wrong step and twisted his body to slash in reverse. Clang! Sparks flew everywhere. In a flash, Su Zimo's body swayed as he made use of the energy from that blow's rebound and crossed his legs, unleashing Divine Steed Fleeting to charge at Divine Steed Fleeting, who was not far away with a furious killing intent. Di Xing was different from Lu Yun. His physique was average, and he was not strong in melee combat. Su Zimo would be able to kill him as long as he could get close. Seemingly seeing through Su Zimo's intentions, Di Xing smirked coldly. Go! Suddenly, he threw out the bone spear in his arms, and it hovered in midair. A pitch-black smoke surged out from his fingertip, entering the spear. The 10-jointed bone spear shone brightly with spirit light and 4 spirit patterns. Di Xing's fingers shifted continuously as he conjured a hand seal while shouting, Go! The moment he said that, the 10-jointed bone spear broke apart and turned into 10 bone spikes. Each of them were shrouded with malefic energy as they shot towards Su Zimo at lightning speed. Su Zimo had just deployed Divine Steed Fleeting when his mind flashed with a warning. In a dizzying moment, he was welcomed by 10 bone spikes. The spikes shone coldly and were extremely sharp. These were not weaker than normal sharp weapons, and holes would definitely appear on one's body if they found their mark. The scariest thing was that the 10 bone spikes were extremely precise and sealed off all of Su Zimo's escape routes. 8 bone spikes occupied 8 different directions. The remaining 2 bone spikes sealed the upwards and downwards directions. All 10 directions were completely sealed. Right then, it would be difficult for Zimo to avoid the bone spikes even if he made use of Anaconda Swath. What a brilliant technique! Zimo was secretly shocked. Ethereal Sword, one of Ethereal Peak's 3 secret skills, was a weapon technique as well and consisted of 3 levels. However, compared to the weapon technique of Malevolent Earth Sect, Ethereal Sword was clearly a class weaker. Ever since he started cultivating, Zimo had fought countless battles. However, this was the first time that a cultivator could seal off his movements with just a weapon technique. Now that he thought about it, it was truly way too lucky that he was able to kill the Malevolent Earth Sect Fiend Heir back then. The presence of the ancient Spirit Lock formation disabled at least half of the Malevolent Earth Sect Fiend Heir's powers. Everything else aside, if the Fiend Heir could use this weapon technique back then, he would have been invincible. In that flash, Zimo did not have time to think as he swung Blood Quencher while channeling his bloodline. He roared loudly, slashing against an incoming bone spike by making use of his immense burst power. Clang! The bone spike was sent flying and a gap appeared. Di Xing was not far away. Zimo's eyes lit up. Just as he was about to charge through the gap, the air behind, above, below and on his sides vibrated immensely. The other 9 bone spikes descended, leaving Zimo no chance at all. Even though Di Xing was not far away, Zimo had no choice but to deal with the 9 bone spikes. No matter how fast he was, he could not match the speed of the bone spikes. Chapter 386, Contracting Tendons and Bones. Chapter 386, Contracting Tendons and Bones. Clang, clang, clang. Zimo swung Blood Quencher and repelled 3 bone spikes consecutively. Right after, he made use of his spirit perception and passed through the gap of 2 bone spikes extremely closely. With a swoosh, a pair of spirit wings appeared behind his back and suddenly, Zimo soared into the air and evaded the remaining 4 bone spikes. The entire process seemed very slow upon narration, but in fact, it occurred in the split of a moment. Any slight delay would have riddled Zimo's body with holes. Zimo was internally shocked by how he had to unleash multiple trump cards just to barely evade the wave of attacks from Di Xing's bone spear. Taking a deep breath, Zimo was about to charge forward and shorten the distance between him and Di Xing when a cold light flashed by his eyes, followed by an incoming wave of malefic energy. The bone spike that he had first repelled was now approaching him once more. The sequence was perfect and Zimo did not have any breathing room at all. With the use of his spirit wings, Zimo hovered in midair and reared his head. His body was almost parallel to the ground. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. A series of piercing sounds could be heard. The previous 9 bone spikes had returned and sealed his path once more. Out of exasperation, Zimo could only swing Blood Quencher and fight head-on. Clang, 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 clang. He had just soared into the skies, but was forced to descend onto the ground after the consecutive furious attacks of the bone spikes. It was only now that Zimo understood why Tang Yu and the others had always thought that he was not a match for Pei Chunyu and Xueyang. Even after he displayed unparalleled strength in that bloody battle on the long street, or killed 2 7 Meridian Foundation establishment cultivators single-handedly, no one thought highly of him. The 2 men before him had already given him an answer. This was the strength of the disciples that belonged to the top factions of Tianhuang mainland. Skynet Fist, Lu Yun's voice sounded. The spirit chi in the void behind Zimo fluctuated wildly. This was a sign of the condensation of spirit arts. The changes of the void alone was enough to tell of how frightening Skynet Fist was. Not far away, Lu Yun conjured a hand seal and punched towards Zimo through the void. A fist that was conjured from spirit energy materialized and was crystal clear. It shot out, punching towards the spot where Zimo landed. Boom! Zimo had just landed on the ground when he heard an explosion. Without looking, He could already feel a gigantic fist coming towards his body with a terrifying might as it caused the surrounding air to explode. Lu Yun had arrived. After Skynet Fist, Lu Yun's body flashed and he charged forward. Swinging his arms, his bracers shone brightly and smashed towards Su Zimo's head. There was no wonder why Lu Yun was a disciple of an immortal sect. His timing was impeccable. Right as Skynet Fist descended, he had arrived while unleashing a killing move. Danger. The current situation was much more dangerous than 10 days ago on that long street. Su Zimo was already having too much trouble dealing with the 10 bone spikes before him, and now, Lu Yun, who was terrifyingly strong in melee combat, was striking from the back. A single misstep and Su Zimo would die on the spot. Lu Yun and Di Xing's eyes shone excitedly. To them, Su Zimo was already a dead man with nowhere to run. Even Pei Chunyu and Shui Yang might not be able to escape unscathed against such an attack. However, what puzzled the two of them was that they couldn't spot a single trace of panic on Su Zimo's face. Those eyes were calm as water with slight ripples of killing intent. All of a sudden, Su Zimo did something that Lu Yun and Di Xing could not understand at all. He put away his blood quencher. Before the two of them could think about why Su Zimo did that, the latter had already struck. Fiend Suppression Seal. Su Zimo's left hand flickered and he connected his middle finger and thumb, conjuring a hand seal while chanting a mental sutra. Boom! A golden palm descended from the sky in a blinding manner. Tearing through the firmament, the patterns on the palm were clearly visible as it slammed towards the Skynet Fist with an apocalyptic might. The palm and fist collided, creating a deafening bang in midair. The spirit chi in the void turned chaotic instantly. A massive wave of energy shot out from the collision as a core, spreading towards the surrounding in a golden light as spirit energy dissipated. Su Zimo's arms were already starting to feel numb after clashing with Di Xing repeatedly earlier on. If not for his powerful bloodline that surged like a tidal wave, he would not be able to lift his arms now, let alone have the strength to retaliate. Right then, Lu Yun's fist flew over. Good move. Su Zimo narrowed his gaze and punched in reverse. His right hand was the indestructible blood-bone palm. One side was an accumulated attack, while the other side was a forced counterattack. Despite knowing that he had the disadvantage in strength, Su Zimo could only ensure that his right hand would not be crippled by the other party's punch. Bang! The fist and arm collided. Lu Yun's bracers struck Su Zimo's fist. However, instead of bones cracking, a dull sound of defeat was heard. Su Zimo's right hand was bloodied, but his bones were intact, merely suffering wounds on his flesh. Huh, his palm isn't crippled? Lu Yun's pupils constricted. The other party merely suffered injuries on the flesh after taking a supreme-grade spirit weapon head-on with his body. In fact, his bones weren't even cracked. As expected, Su Zimo's strength was not enough for that clash, and his body stumbled backwards towards the 10 incoming bone spikes. Fufu, he's going to die in my hands still. Di Xing sneered. However, he stopped before he could finish. Under their watchful gazes, Su Zimo was about to be pierced by the 10 bone spikes when his bones and tendons sounded at the same time. They shifted and suddenly contracted into a bundle, making him the size of a small child. Pissed. The two of them gasped. Lu Yun was even more shocked. How was that possible? Because Glass Palace specialized in body tempering, he knew very well that it was extremely difficult for a person to achieve what Su Zimo just did. That was the art of tendons transformation, a point where even the tendons and bones have been cultivated to the extreme. In fact, a person could change their appearance with this. Only a nascent soul with an essence spirit could distinguish between the person's true appearance. Even Pei Chunyu of Glass Palace could not achieve this, let alone him. After his body shrank, a few bone spikes that should have pierced Su Zimo missed instantly. Despite that, Su Zimo could not avoid all of the bone spikes. His miniature frame twisted in midair and contorted into an unimaginable arc, shuttling through a few bone spikes. Poof! Flashes of blood appeared. A bone spike brushed by Su Zimo's chest, leaving a wound. Although he did not manage to avoid all the bone spikes, Zimo managed to escape from a fatal situation with his unparalleled use of Tendons transformation. Crackle. In front of the two of them, Zimo's bones and tendons sounded, and that child expanded right away, turning to his original body once more. Chapter 387. Kill? Chapter 387. Kill? Di Xing's gaze was dark as he glared at the wound on Zimo's chest. Although that wound wasn't deep, the weapons of malevolent Earth Sect were all basked and tempered in malefic energy. The moment they injure anyone, malefic energy would surge into the smallest of wounds. Those that were lightly affected would not be able to channel their spirit energy efficiently, and their combat strength would weaken. If they did not purge it in time, it might even destroy their foundation and cripple their chances at future cultivation. Those that were severely affected would have their hearts enveloped by the malefic energy, severing their meridians and killing them on the spot. Right in front of Di Xing, the wound on Zimo's chest flashed with streaks of lightning, purging the malefic energy entirely. Zimo stood where he was and glared at Lu Yun and Di Xing coldly. The killing intent in his eyes intensified and his aura was changing as well. Hee. Di Xing laughed menacingly. Zimo, surrender. That Tendons transformation of yours is only going to work the first time. Next time, I'll be prepared and you'll be shred to pieces even if you turn into a baby. Zimo, I'm going to give you a chance. Suddenly, Lu Yun's eyes shone and he said, as long as you're willing to hand over your body tempering technique, I'll let you off. Furthermore, I'll be on your side and kill Di Xing. How does that sound? Fu. Zimo burst into laughter as he twisted his neck while his eyes shone with a demonic glint. You guys really think you've won? The moment he said that, a sinister wind gusted without warning. Looking at Zimo with his sinister expression not far away, Lu Yun and Di Xing felt an unprecedented sense of fear. Why am I feeling this way? The two of them exchanged glances with grim expressions. You want my body tempering technique? Zimo licked his lips with a ferocious glint in his eyes. Grinning, he shouted, that depends on whether you can remain alive to learn it. Boom! A muffled sound rang out from within Zimo's body, as though some seal had been released and an ancient demon had been summoned. It was terrifying. Although they had been fighting for a short time, Zimo had already realized that he wouldn't be able to defeat the two of them if he continued fighting with his current strength. Since there was nobody else at this place, he could kill them in his demon form without anybody knowing. Zimo's power of blood chi erupted and his body expanded. Demonic chi shrouded his body as his pupils turned pitch black, appearing imperceptibly in the scarlet demonic chi. It's a demon. Lu Yun and Di Xing were shocked. No, how is it possible? The moment they saw that dense demonic aura, the two of them thought that Zimo was a demon. However, they were puzzled on second thought. There was no way demons could take on human form before they formed an inner core. How was that possible? Furthermore, Zimo had clearly unlocked the 8 meridians that only humans possessed. How could he be a demon? Everything before them was completely unexplainable. In truth, even nascent souls or void reversions would not be able to explain this, let alone the two of them. Typically, humans and demons had different paths. Their languages were different, as were their body structures, cultivation techniques, and methods. Even tigers and leopards that were the closest to the demon race had different cultivation techniques, let alone humans and demons. The cultivation techniques, bloodlines, and everything else were different between the two races. If Zimo was a human, what about the demonic chi that was coming from him? The richness of that demonic chi was no weaker than pure-blooded ferocious beasts. In Lu Yun and Di Xing's moment of daze, Zimo shifted and arrived before Lu Yun in the blink of an eye. A series of afterimages appeared behind Zimo, lasting for a long time. Lu Yun's expression changed and his heart nearly exploded. Zimo was too imposing and terrifying. Lunging over with that asphyxiating aura, he was even more feral than the ferocious beasts of the ancient era with his surging blood chi and cold killing intent. Lu Yun did not have time to contemplate and activated his bloodline, churning spirit energy furiously as his bracers shone with a bedazzling spirit light. "I don't care what sort of a monster you are, just die," Lu Yun hollered and channeled his energy to the max. The veins on his neck popped out as he swung his arms, smashing violently down on Su Zimo's head. That was no arm. With the augmentation of Glass Palace's secret skill, his arm was veiled with a layer of luster. With the support of a supreme-grade spirit weapon on top of it, that was a steel whip as thick as an arm. Su Zimo did not dodge nor retreat. His eyes shone brightly with a violent glint as he extended his arm and welcomed the strike. With a thunk, Su Zimo's arm swung out, resembling an elephant's trunk that was limp and weak. The moment the two arms made contact, Su Zimo's arm coiled and trembled. The mysterious luster on Lu Yun's hand dissipated instantly. Crack, crack, crack. Even with the protection of his bracers, Lu Yun's arm was contorted with the bones inside shattered. All the bone fragments pierced out from his flesh in a bloodied, horrific manner. "Ah!" Lu Yun shrieked tragically as color drained from his face. After taking on demon form, Su Zimo's strength had not only increased from the burst of his blood chi, he had even unleashed a killing move of the mystic classic of the 12 demon kings of the great wilderness. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. A gust of wind blew behind Su Zimo's head, producing a vague, stinging pain. He did not have to see to know that Di Xing must have attacked. Heh. With a sneer, Su Zimo rushed up without stopping at all after crippling Lu Yun's arm. Lu Yun grit his teeth and cold sweat poured from his head. As long as he could block Su Zimo for a moment, Di Xing's 10 bone spikes would descend before long and trap Su Zimo within. At that time, he would be able to escape. As a final gambit, Lu Yun punched out once again. Su Zimo's strength was not the only thing that increased after he took on his demon form. His speed increased as well. Instead of slowing down, Su Zimo hastened and his body curled into a spiral ball. His knee seemed to be in a kneeling position, and it barely dodged Lu Yun's punch. As though he was propping up an immortal peach with his hands, Su Zimo arrived in front of Lu Yun and suddenly pushed both palms upwards against Lu Yun's chin. Snap! Instantly, Lu Yun's head was tossed back. His jaw smashed and his throat snapped on the spot. He was no longer breathing. Di Xing gasped when he saw that. Nobody could have imagined that a 7 Meridian Foundation establishment cultivator from Glass Palace that was known for their immense physiques would die in a single round of melee combat. A cold light tore through the air as 10 bone spikes chased relentlessly. Initially, they should have landed on Su Zimo's back. However, Su Zimo's body fell flat to the ground and he slithered forward, like an anaconda in the grass as he charged towards Di Xing. This time round, he evaded 9 bone spikes completely. Poof, poof, poof. The 9 bone spikes pierced Lu Yun's body instead. The remaining bone spike was about to strike Su Zimo's head when the latter stretched out his right hand and allowed it to pierce his palm instead. It could not pierce through. A supreme-grade spirit weapon spike could not pierce through Su Zimo's right hand. In Di Xing's moment of daze, his vision blurred and a tall figure stood up from the ground, obstructing his view. It was too fast. Anyone within 10 feet would die instantly. Di Xing felt his heart sink. The next moment, a grisly red demonic chi rumbled and engulfed Di Xing within it. Chapter 388, Immortal Ruin. Chapter 388, Immortal Ruin. A moment later, the grisly red demonic chi dissipated, revealing 2 figures. Di Xing's eyes were widened with fright as 5 bloodied holes appeared at the top of his head, streaming with blood. He was already dead. With a shrug, Su Zimo's tendons and bones sounded, and that gigantic body of his reverted to normal instantly. After changing into a fresh set of green robes, Su Zimo picked up the storage bags on the waists of the 2 men. He compared them before speeding forward. The Saber Mountain Spirit Sea was about 2 to 3 days away from Xuantian City on foot. Along the way, Su Zimo checked out Lu Yu and Di Xing's storage bags. Initially, He thought that it would be best if he could discover the weapon technique of malevolent Earth Sect that could wield those tin bone spikes. He could cultivate it and use it on his flying swords. That way, he would not only be able to conjure sword formations, but also burst forth with immense killing power with that weapon technique. To his disappointment, he found nothing worthwhile in their storage bags. However, Su Zimo could understand the logic behind it. The weapon technique of malevolent Earth Sect was definitely a secret skill. There was no way it would be put in a storage bag casually. It was the same for Ethereal Peak's 3 secret skills. Even Golden Cores were not allowed to carry the secret skills with them, let alone Su Zimo and the others. Even though he managed to kill disciples of the Super Sects, Malevolent Earth Sect, and Glass Palace, in this battle, Su Zimo had been self-reflecting. While he had been through countless battles ever since he started cultivating, he had rarely fought with disciples of these super sections. The only time was deep underground. 1 against 5, Su Zimo even managed to defeat 5 Fiend heirs of the Fiend sections. That battle created a false impression for him that even Fiend sects were merely of that standard. In that case, there was nothing to fear about Immortal sects and Buddhist monasteries. Furthermore, in recent years, Su Zimo never had the taste of failure within his same level and had even managed to kill opponents above his level. In his battle knowledge, he felt that he could make use of his movement techniques to shorten the distance between his opponents and kill them even if their cultivation realms were higher than his. However, this battle awakened Su Zimo and humbled him. Truly powerful opponents could restrict his movements and actions just by making use of brilliant weapon techniques. In fact, they can force him to have nowhere to hide, let alone get close. Di Xing's tin bone spikes were swift, strong, and had sharp angles. Their attacks were fluid as water with no delays between them. Su Zimo could barely deal with it, let alone get close to kill his opponents. That was precisely the terrifying and powerful aspect of Qi refinement cultivators. Most cultivators were indeed weak in physique and would die if demon beasts closed into them, that was a fact. However, cultivators could make use of various spirit arts and weapons to restrict a demon beast's movements. Body-tempered cultivators and Qi refinement cultivators had their own advantages and flaws. The stronger of the two would depend on which side had the stronger advantage. Take the battle earlier, for example. Su Zimo could not deal with the attacks of the tin bone spikes merely by activating his bloodline. However, after he took on demon form and burst with his blood Qi, his strength and speed was raised by a level, magnifying his advantage as a body-tempered cultivator and allowing him to close in and kill his opponent. Di Xing and Lu Yu were enough to cause trouble for Su Zimo. If he was dealing with Pei Chunyu and Xueyang, things would be even more difficult. Furthermore, Glass Palace and Malevolent Earth Sect were only a part of the Immortal and Fiend sections. There were a total of 9 Immortal sects, 7 Fiend sects, and 6 Buddhist monasteries. All of those ancient sects had firm foundations and countless secret skills. What sort of methods would their legacy disciples possess, and how terrifying would they be? Despite knowing that, Su Zimo's eyes had no trace of worry. Instead, they shone with a fervent gleam. On the surface, he had ventured deep into the ancient battlefield for a perfect meridian unlocking elixir. However, deep in his heart, Su Zimo wanted to witness the disciples of these super sects. He wanted to battle. He wanted to battle through the world. Deep in his bones, there was a pride that did not allow him to be weaker than others. Thanks to his strong stamina and physique, Su Zimo traveled day and night without resting. Even in the night, he didn't have any scruples. By emitting his immense demonic qi while traveling, few demon beasts dared to approach him. 2 days later, Su Zimo slowed down gradually and looked at the distant horizon with deep shock in his eyes. He had never seen the legendary Saber Mountain Spirit Sea before. However, the moment he arrived at this place, he already knew that the mountain and sea before him was the exact location. Before he even arrived, Su Zimo could hear the rumbling of the sea gushing and invigorating one's mind. The damp aura blew at his face. The aura was not merely damp air. It was damp spirit qi that was rich and pure. Could the boundless sea before me be made up of spirit chi entirely? Suzimo could not help but feel shocked when that thought crossed his mind. Right then, the sound of clothes flapping through the air rang. A few cultivators arrived, and their conversation attracted Suzimo. The Saber Mountain Spirit Sea is the sacred grounds for saber cultivators like us. Even if we can't obtain the inheritance of the Saber Emperor, we have to pay it a visit. It's said that in the ancient times, before the Saber Emperor left Tianhuang mainland, he used his supreme dermic powers and absorbed the spirit chi and minerals within 5,000 kilometers, forming a mountain and sea. It was because he did not want the way of the saber to be lost in Tianhuang mainland that he created this immortal ruin, the Saber Mountain Spirit Sea. That's amazing, someone exclaimed. Suzimo was shocked as well. What sort of prowess was it for someone to amass chi and minerals to form a sea and mountain with the flip of a hand? It was comparable to carrying a mountain burning the skies for rain to form an ocean. The most frightening thing was that this spirit sea was created countless years ago back in the ancient era. The sands of time erased countless major sects of the ancient era, leaving no trace behind. However, this ruin was still intact without any signs of drying up. If the legend was true, the Saber Emperor might have already surpassed the level of a cultivator. There has always been a saying in the cultivation world that at the end of the road, one would become the legendary immortal of the ethereal voids, growing old with unfailing ears and eyes. However, nobody could give a definite answer as to whether or not there were truly immortals. But to Suzimo, even the immortal methods of the legends were nothing much. Now that he was here, the Saber Mountain Spirit Sea brought a greater impact for Suzimo. There were countless dark reefs near the shore. For some reason, the reefs were covered with marks of sharp weapons, etched in a shocking manner. The tides roared furiously with a majestic aura, crashing onto the shores and creating snow-like waves. On the horizon of the sea was a mountain that towered into the clouds. The shape of that mountain resembled a long saber that was stabbed into the sea. With a slender and precipitous blade, its handle was hidden in the clouds, barely visible. This was the Saber Mountain Spirit Sea. Chapter 389. Indeed, you have come. Chapter 389. Indeed, you have come. The sword reigned supreme in Tianhuang mainland, and there were extremely few pure saber cultivators, much less in the ancient battlefield. Although the ruin was left behind by the Saber Emperor, there were not many cultivators gathered here. Merely a few thousand people gathered along the coastline. The strange thing was that most of the cultivators stood far away from the shore, seemingly afraid of the spirit sea as they pointed in hushed discussions. Because he had limited knowledge of the Saber Mountain Spirit Sea, Suzimo came beside the crowd and listened intently. The methods of the Saber Emperor are extraordinary to be able to condense chi into a sea. I'm sure the benefits of cultivating in this spirit sea must be immense. In the crowd, a skinny cultivator murmured deeply with bright eyes. Fufu, how ignorant. The moment he said that, the crowd started mocking him. The person who first spoke blushed and craned his neck, refuting, "What did I say wrongly?" The spirit chi within the spirit sea is extremely rich and pure. However, it possesses boundless saber chi and is extremely sharp. You will have to receive the baptism of the saber chi the moment you enter the spirit sea. With your tiny frame, you will most likely explode a few steps into the spirit sea. Hee, there have been countless elites who have been buried in this spirit sea throughout history. You can try entering if you're not afraid of death. Suzimo was enlightened. This was the reason why there were marks of sharp weapons on the reefs. It was because the spirit sea contained endless saber chi and cultivators with weak physiques could not handle it at all. If they stood too close to the shore, one might not be able to escape if a huge wave crashed and engulfed them within. A cultivator said in a deep voice, "This is a test left behind by the Saber Emperor. One will have to cross the spirit sea and ascend the Saber Mountain if they want to obtain his inheritance." Suzimo looked into the distance. The Saber Mountain stood erect at the end of the Spirit Sea, truly far away and unreachable. That's easy. The skinny cultivator pointed to the Saber Mountain and declared proudly, "We can just ride on our flying swords. Even though the Saber Mountain is far away, there's no way we wouldn't be able to reach it before nightfall." Ha 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 ha. The crowd laughed once more. Someone shook his head. If the test left behind by the Saber Emperor was so simple, there wouldn't only have been a single person who received his inheritance from the ancient era till now, right? Before he finished, a cultivator arrived from far away, looking excited. Summoning a spirit saber from his storage bag, that person leaped onto it and channeled spirit energy before shouting softly, "Go." Sure. He turned into a streak of light and crossed the spirit sea, flying towards the Saber Mountain. Most of the cultivators in the crowd had mocking expressions and smirked coldly, as if waiting to see a joke. Suzimo knew that things were probably not so simple. Before he could complete his thought, the person froze in midair above the spirit sea and paused for a moment before falling in. No matter how that person struggled to channel spirit energy in midair, it was useless. He was swallowed by a wave before he even fell into the spirit sea. He floated on the spirit sea and let out an occasional scream before vanishing after a brief moment. The surface of the water was stained with blood that was gradually washed away by the surging waves. The skinny cultivator who first declared that he wanted to ride his flying sword across the spirit sea turned pale as sweat poured down from his forehead while he breathed hurriedly. Suzimo was secretly shocked as well. The spirit sea was truly out to kill. That explains why nobody has tried to cross the spirit sea despite thousands of cultivators standing here. A cultivator at the side explained, "Flying is forbidden in the skies above the spirit sea. Even if you manage to enter it, you will still fall into the water. You're only asking for trouble trying to come up with tricks in the face of an emperor," someone else sneered. The skinny cultivator composed himself and asked again after a brief moment, "In that case, only disciples of body-tempering super sects such as Glass Palace and Overlord Palace can cross the spirit sea? It doesn't matter what sect you are from." Another cultivator explained, "Only Saber cultivators are qualified to cross the spirit sea. Any other cultivator will be minced to death by the Saber Chi if they try to cross it forcefully." That's right. I heard that in the past, a paragon from Sword Sect tried to cross the spirit sea to challenge the Saber Emperor's authority. Before he was even 100 meters in, he was sliced apart by the Saber Chi and buried within the spirit sea. With that, Suzimo had a rough understanding towards the Saber Mountain Spirit Sea. First, one could not fly over. Second, one had to be a saber cultivator. Third, only those with a physique strong enough to withstand the baptism of the saber Chi can cross the Spirit Sea and pass the Saber Emperor's test. In that case, he might truly be able to give it a shot. Right then, Suzimo's gaze shifted towards a dark black reef by the shore. A man in blood-colored robes sat there with a long saber placed horizontally across his knees. His eyes were shut and his drenched black hair swayed casually, covering his face. Of the thousands of cultivators, this man was the only one who dared to sit on a reef by the shore regardless of the waves. Even though his clothes were long drenched, he seemed oblivious to the fact. There were more than 10 corpses behind this person. Some of them had clearly just died not long ago. When he looked at the person's back view, Suzimo felt like he had seen this man somewhere before but could not recall where. After pondering for a moment, he looked at a cultivator beside him and asked softly, "Who's the blood-robed cultivator?" "That's a savage character." The cultivator whispered warily, "Do you see those corpses behind him? Those were cultivators who wanted to cross the Spirit Sea. However, they chose to start too close to him and were killed by him. Just because of that?" Suzimo furrowed his brows slightly. If that was the only reason why this man went on a massacre, he was definitely not just savage. The cultivator pursed his lips and said, "Zenith Sects Fiend Heir doesn't need reasons to kill. It's him." Suzimo's heart skipped a beat. The cultivator at the side continued, there's a high chance he's going to cross the Spirit Sea and obtain the inheritance. I heard that the cultivator who managed to obtain the Saber Emperor's inheritance 1,000 years ago was from Zenith Sect as well. All of a sudden, the blood-robed cultivator who was seated on the reef with his eyes shut stood up and turned around slowly, looking in Su Zimo's direction. A top-tier expert as such would definitely sense something if someone was staring at him for a long time. Furthermore, at that moment, Su Zimo's mental state fluctuated slightly, and there was even a hint of hostility in his eyes. When he saw the person's face, Su Zimo no longer had any doubts. The blood-robed cultivator was the fiend heir of Zenith Sect that he had fought underground back then. Fu. The blood-robed cultivator laughed and stared at Su Zimo. His eyes were bright and burned with excitement as he said slowly, "Indeed, you have come. I've been waiting for a long time." Chapter 390, Crossing the Spirit Sea. Chapter 390, Crossing the Spirit Sea. The moment he said that, the saber hovering in front of the cultivator buzzed loudly, emitting an extremely intense killing intent that sent shivers down one's spine. The group of cultivators who were originally standing beside Su Zimo dispersed in shock. The blood-robed cultivator's name was Bai Yu. Back then, after the few of us escaped by chance, we thought that you were buried beneath. Bai Yu's gaze was burning as he stuck out his grisly red tongue, revealing a set of pearly whites and a sinister smile. However, when I heard that Demoness G survived, I guessed instantly that you must have too. Su Zimo did not move and asked with a calm expression, "You knew that I was coming?" "Haha." Bai Yu replied delightedly, "Given your potential and methods, there's no doubt you will enter the ancient battlefield. Furthermore, since you use sabers, you are a saber cultivator and will definitely come to the Saber Mountain Spirit Sea." The competition for the position of the Fiend Heir was extremely intense in the Fiend sections. Almost all the Fiend Heirs got to their positions by trampling on countless corpses. None of them were common folks. It was especially so for Zenith Sect. For a sect that established its roots through killing, the competition between fellow disciples was even more cruel. As the Fiend Heir of Zenith Sect, there was no way he could swallow the indignance of losing to an unknown cultivator underground back then. Seems like the two of them have a deep feud. What is the background of that man? How is he still alive and well despite having a feud with the Fiend Heir of Zenith Sect? Far away, the cultivators discussed in groups. Bai Yu's gaze darted past Su Zimo's waist, and he could not help but scoff coldly when he did not catch sight of a sect badge. "I don't care what your background is, today. I'm going to take your life to establish my Dao formation. I'm afraid you're going to be disappointed." Su Zimo replied indifferently, "If I can defeat you once, I can definitely defeat you again." The moment he said that, the crowd fell into an uproar. That man managed to defeat the Fiend Heir of Zenith Sect? What's his background? Do you need to ask? He's definitely a paragon from one of the 9 immortal sects. Clang, clang. Without a second word, Su Zimo took out Blood Quencher from his storage bag. His spirit energy churned and the saber shone brightly like a frightening blood sun. A perfect 5 patterns with a torrential blood chi. The blood stench emitted by Bai Yu was extremely similar to Bai Yu's aura. Good saber, good saber. Bai Yu's eyes lit up and he burst into laughter. That saber was practically custom-made for me. You think you're worthy of it? Su Zimo replied indifferently. Blood Quencher was refined by him personally. Right when he was about to fail, he infused his bloodline to condense the 5th spirit pattern, completing it. Su Zimo's bloodline was used to cultivate the mystic classic of the 12 demon kings of the Great Wilderness in the Void Thunder Manual, and it possessed essence of the dragon race. Apart from him, there was no one in this world that was worthy of wielding it. Deploying Divine Steed Fleeting, Su Zimo lunged forward before releasing Plow Heaven Stride. He landed on a reef in front of Bai Yu and stopped. Boom! The reef exploded. Blood Quencher descended from the sky and its blood beam exploded, engulfing Bai Yu within it. Huh? He's only at 5 Meridian Foundation establishment? A 5 Meridian Foundation establishment cultivator is actually challenging the fiend heir of Zenith Sect? How did he manage to survive to this point with his low cultivation realm? A wave of shock and astonishment could be heard from the crowd. Clang! Baiyu did not retreat nor dodge. He propped up his supreme-grade saber with both arms and retaliated with a backhand slash. The sound of metal clashing overwhelmed the crowd's exclamations while silencing all their previous doubts. 7 spirit meridians shone beneath Baiyu's blood robes as spirit energy gushed, emanating a thick blood stench and almost materializing his killing intent. However, Baiyu did not have any advantage against Su Zimo's slash. Such terrifying melee combat strength. That person's bloodline. I seem to be hearing the sound of a tsunami in it. You must have heard wrongly. That must be the sound of the spirit sea. Tsunami blood. How could someone have cultivated their bloodline to that level? Baiyu's eyes flashed with a cold killing intent. Loosening his grip, Baiyu's saber left his hand and revolved around Blood Quencher's blade, aiming straight for Su Zimo's face. That attack was extremely strange and had surpassed Su Zimo's knowledge and expectation. Shocked, Su Zimo retreated hurriedly. Shing! Although he managed to dodge it in time, a cut was still made on his robes in front of his chest. His chest felt a chill and a slight sting. Baiyu scoffed coldly and did not bother to fight head-on with Su Zimo. Striding forward, he gripped his saber once more and his figure flashed. The next moment, he slashed down at Su Zimo's ribs with his saber's blade pointing up. Su Zimo frowned. Baiyu's saber technique was extremely lethal. However, the angles in which the blade came from were way too sharp and difficult to deal with. Su Zimo retreated once more. In the past, Su Zimo merely had to make use of his terrifying bloodline as well as his perfect spirit weapon, Blood Quencher, to cleave down in simple moves, and that was enough to take down his opponents. However, in the past few days, he realized his weakness after exchanging blows with disciples of Tianhuang Mainland's top factions. He did not know any saber techniques at all and was full of openings. The moment he attacked, his opponents would locate his openings and deal him a fatal strike. Baiyu did not have to fight head-on and could force Su Zimo to retreat just by relying on his superior saber technique. Su Zimo did not even dare to retaliate with his saber. If he did, it would be a mistake. His openings would only be magnified and his situation would become much more dangerous. Baiyu's attacks were relentless and came in a flurry. Every single slash was a killing move with a murderous intent, causing blood stench to surge everywhere. If he was careless, Su Zimo could die on the spot. With the help of his spirit perception, Su Zimo managed to avoid a number of dangerous situations. Back then, underground, Su Zimo was able to fight against 5 men and even kill a fiend heir. But now, without the ancient spirit lock formation, the fiend heir of Zenith Sect could fight at his maximum strength and suppress Su Zimo completely with the help of his precise and sinister saber techniques. Even so, there was still no trace of panic in Su Zimo's eyes. It was simple for him if he wanted to break free of the current predicament. He could take on his demon form and burst forth with his blood chi. At that time, Su Zimo's strength and speed would be raised to another level, and he could fight at melee range no matter the type of saber technique he had to face. However, there were many people around. If he were to take on demon form, he would most likely be an outcast in the ancient battlefield in Tianhuang Mainland from now on. The second option he had was to cross the Spirit Sea. As he thought about it, Su Zimo already had a plan in mind. With a long howl, he retreated and dashed towards the Spirit Sea. What? That man wants to cross the Spirit Sea? Does he have a death wish? Now that he was worked up, there was no way Baiyu was going to let Su Zimo off as he hollered, "There's nowhere for you to run." One after another, the two of them appeared above the Spirit Sea in an instant. Su Zimo took a deep breath of air and skipped on the waves with light treads. Sprinting towards the Saber Mountain, he was 5 kilometers away in the blink of an eye. Baiyu bit his long saber with his mouth and sprawled like a water strider that was floating on the water. Gliding with his limbs, his speed was not slower than Xuantian's. Chapter 391, Unwavering. Chapter 391, Unwavering. The Spirit Sea was definitely not a blessed place in the eyes of everyone. This was a place where countless elites and paragons have been consumed. Right now, there were few cultivators who dared to attempt it. Xuantian and Bayu's rush into the Spirit Sea one after another caused a commotion. Initially, the water surface merely surged with waves. However, after the two of them entered, the Spirit Sea seemed to have been agitated and turned tumultuous. Gigantic waves over 100,000 feet tall were formed, crashing down with tremendous auras. Xuantian and Bayu froze at the same time, looking at the towering wave before them with stunned expressions. This was the power of heaven and earth and was impossible for humans to resist. In the face of the raging wave, Xuantian and Bayu appeared tiny and insignificant. Bang! Boom! Boom! The massive wave crashed and absorbed the two of them into the sea. Even golden cores would find it hard to resist such power. Before he was sucked in, Xuantian hurriedly took a deep breath of air and held it. In the blink of an eye, the two of them were devoured. Now that he truly entered the Spirit Sea, Xuantian experienced the Saber chi that those cultivators were talking about. Every single drop of seawater possessed an infinitely sharp intent, slicing at his body from all directions like a blade. Even with his powerful body, he could feel slight waves of pain. Xuantian was secretly shocked. If any ordinary cultivator were absorbed by the Spirit Sea, they would most likely be torn into pieces within 10 breaths. All of a sudden, Xuantian's mind flashed with a warning as the water current behind him fluctuated unusually. It was as though an extremely sharp object was cutting through the waves towards him. It's Bayu. Even after entering the Spirit Sea, Bayu did not give up on hunting down Xuantian. Xuantian exerted all his force and leaped like a water dragon, resurfacing above the water. He tread on the water and continued sprinting towards the Saber Mountain. Bayu was hot on his heels. In front of them, the waves rumbled louder and louder. The ocean spray was like a white line between the sky and the sea, resembling a massive army charging at them with ferocious momentum. In the blink of an eye, Xuantian and Bayu were swallowed by the wave once more. They resurfaced time and again only to be eaten up by the waves repeatedly. Under the baptism of the endless Saber chi, even Xuantian was feeling pressured. The deeper into the Spirit Sea, the more terrifying the power of the waves became. The sea howled relentlessly and the waves surged, as if they could not calm down unless they ate Xuantian and Bayu. The two of them slowed down. The distance between the two of them increased as well. In terms of physique, Bayu could not match Xuantian's after all. By now, Bayu was already feeling a little exhausted and dizzy. The longer they were in the Spirit Sea, the more Saber chi they would accumulate within their body. Once the limit it could endure was reached, the body would be shredded up by the endless Saber chi, causing the flesh, tendons, bones, and organs to be cut up. Bayu could already sense the Saber chi of the Spirit Sea invading his organs. With a leap, he appeared on the surface of the sea and took a deep breath of air. There was a faint taste of salt at the bottom of his throat. I can't chase anymore. Bayu's heart skipped a beat. He would still have a chance if he were to return to shore right now. If he truly entered the depths of the Spirit Sea, it would be too late even if he wanted to retreat at that time. His eyes were filled with hatred as he looked at Xuantian, who was still floating in the Spirit Sea. He was indignant that he could not get to kill Xuantian personally. However, to him, Xuantian would definitely die if the latter continued to advance. That was because the waves of the deep sea would only turn more ferocious and the Saber chi would be even sharper. At that thought, Bayu scoffed coldly and turned for the shore. As for Xuantian, he was getting further and further from the shore. Xuantian did not bother about what Bayu did. In the Spirit Sea, given Bayu's physique, there was no way the latter could catch up to him. Xuantian's attention was entirely focused on how he should deal with the waves crashing from all directions, on how he should pass the test to reach the Saber Mountain. After arriving on the shore, Bayu's face was pale as he assumed a lotus position right away to channel his bloodline so as to purge away the Saber chi in his body. A long time later, thousands of cultivators stood at the shore and watched the tiny figure. All of them were shocked with agape mouths. For hours had passed, and that man was still struggling through the spirit sea. This was an outcome that none of them had expected. At this moment, even though Su Zimo appeared tiny, none of them viewed him as a pathetic being. His unyielding will moved everyone. It was the same for the path of cultivation as well. If one did not have a will and determination as such, how could they reach the very end? Could he truly be able to obtain the Saber Emperor's inheritance? I don't think so. Throughout history, only one person has succeeded. This person can't do it. By the looks of it, I don't think he can hold out for much longer. Many cultivators discussed softly. Suddenly, Bayu opened his eyes and let out a long breath, adding a tinge of redness back to his face. He had finally expelled all the Saber chi in his body after 4 hours of cultivation. However, during this period of time, Su Zimo was still advancing against the tide, fighting against the surging waves and the sharp Saber chi. I don't believe that you'll be able to reach the Saber Mountain. Bayu glared ahead coldly and mumbled with grit teeth. Right then, another torrential wave surfaced on the sea far away, crashing heavily onto the figure. The figure shuddered and disappeared into the sea once more. This was a sight that the cultivators were numb and used to. Not long later, that figure would resurface once more. 15 minutes passed and nothing happened. After an hour, it was the same. The person seemed to have disappeared. The joy in Bayu's eyes intensified. After 2 hours, the crowd was finally certain that the scholarly green-robed cultivator had perished in the spirit sea. Sigh, it's a little regrettable. If that person had a high cultivation realm, he might have truly passed the test. That's right, he was only at 5 Meridian Foundation establishment. With that potential, his future accomplishments are limitless. The two cultivators spoke in a regretful tone. When he heard that, Bayu, who was on a reef at the front, looked grim and killing intent surged within him. With a flash, he arrived before the two cultivators and cut twice without saying anything. Poof, poof, flashes of blood appeared. The 2 slashes were extremely fast, coupled with the fact that the two cultivators were totally unprepared. Their necks were sliced by Bayu instantly and blood sprayed everywhere as they died on the shore with eyes widened in regret. The Tao of Zenith sect was to kill. If one wanted to kill, they killed, regardless of reason or explanation. The remaining cultivators were shocked and dispersed hurriedly, running as far as they could from Bayu. Bayu looked calm even after killing 2 people, as if he had done something perfectly normal. Returning to a reef, he continued cultivating with closed eyes. No one else knew. At the bottom of the spirit sea, a figure was walking forth, step by step. Stepping on the sand at the bottom of the sea, he wielded a blood-colored saber in his left hand. Although he was already covered with wounds, he continued forging ahead. The bottom of the spirit sea was dark and cold. Yet, those eyes shone with a bright light that was unwavering like a mountain. Chapter 392, Breakthrough. Chapter 392, Breakthrough. It was getting increasingly difficult to travel on the surface of the sea. The power of the waves was too strong and Su Zimo's body was already breaking apart from the relentless impacts. His organs were already shaking violently. He would definitely die if he continued that way. As such, Su Zimo could only take a deep breath of air and sink to the bottom of the sea. The bottom of the sea was filled with white bones. Those were the elites that have died in the spirit sea over countless years. Stepping on their bones, Su Zimo advanced slowly. The bottom of the sea was much calmer compared to the surface without any shocking or turbulent waves. However, there was the undercurrent. Deep in the sea, Su Zimo had to endure even more pressure with the endless saber chi alongside going against the current. There were countless times when he was pushed back by the undercurrent, However, each time, he got back up and continued advancing. As time passed by, the saber chi within Xuantian's body was already at his limit. Wounds appeared on his flesh, blood vessels, tendons, bones, and organs as the sharp saber chi crisscrossed. Xuantian's skin had already split open and blood was oozing out. There were spiderweb-like cracks all over Xuantian's body, and it looked horrifying. He grunted and stopped in his tracks. If this continued, his life force would be completely destroyed by the saber chi. Xuantian sat on the ground and burst forth with his power of blood chi. He was not worried about his demonic cultivation being exposed now that he was at the bottom of the sea. The sound of tsunami, rumbling thunder, tigers and leopards, as well as an odd sound that was rather familiar, emanated out from his body in a terrifying manner. Dragon's roar? A thought flashed through Xuantian's mind. This fourth sound was the dragon's roar that he had heard back in the primordial ruins. It possessed a vastness, majesty, and solemnness that came from the primordial era. The half a dragon's egg that Xuantian ate left an irremovable mark in his body. At the same time, he began to circulate the mental technique of the mystic classic of the 12 demon kings of the great wilderness. If he wanted to survive, he would first have to suppress the saber chi within him. From the initial body tempering section, he carried on with tendons transformation, bone strengthening, marrow cleansing, organs refinement, and finally ended at orifice clearing. Xuantian chanted the 6 sutras internally and circulated their mantras mentally, cycling them continuously within his body. A wild bovine demon king appeared behind Xuantian, plowing through the heavens. Its horns were sharp as spears as it raised its head furiously, threatening to tear the firmaments apart. After a slight delay, another phantom appeared. This time round, it was a massive bear demon that stood upright and howled into the skies. Right after, an anaconda circled around with cold eyes. A towering ape demon stood with bloodshot eyes, roaring in an untamed manner as it pounded its chest and stomped its feet. The dull thuds produced sounded like a god drumming from the heavens. On his back, a divine steed with bone spikes galloped over, cracking the voids everywhere its hooves landed in a frightening manner. Right after, the phantoms of the white tiger and spirit leopard appeared, bearing their menacing fangs as they lunged over. Billions of lightning bolts coiled around Xuantian's body blindingly. In that sea of lightning, the phantoms of countless demon kings appeared, howling into the skies with endless might as they fought against the saber chi within Xuantian's body. In front of everyone, the surface of the sea that had returned to normalcy suddenly started surging once more with torrential waves without any warning at all. It was as though a terrifying life form of the ancient era was awakening at the bottom of the sea. Could that man be alive? It can't be, right? The cultivators were filled with doubt. Bayu's eyes flashed with suspicion. Deep in the sea, saber chi streaked rampantly, leaving wounds both inside and outside Xuantian's body. His bloodline rumbled and wounds were healed to normal the moment they oozed with traces of blood. Destruction and repair, destruction and repair. The cycle continued. Intense pain stimulated Xuantian's nerves. However, his gaze was only burning brighter. Xuantian's blood, flesh, tendons, bones, meridians, and organs underwent a transformation once more under the cycle. It wouldn't be long before his mouth orifice would be cleared as well. Whether or not he obtained the Saber Emperor's inheritance, this was not a trip in vain. There was no way he would be able to clear his mouth orifice within a month without pressure as such. A long time later, Xuantian's body shuddered, and he suddenly opened his mouth, letting out a howl. Given the terrifying pressure of his surroundings, seawater would gush in the moment he opened his mouth. Doing it was simply courting death. However, as he howled, the phantoms of the demon kings behind him howled at the same time. A tremendous sound wave was released, causing endless ripples and forced back the seawater around him. His mouth orifice was cleared. At this point of his cultivation, of the 7 orifices, his eye orifices were the only ones yet to be cleared. After howling, The seawater drowned Suzimo in an even more turbulent manner, crashing repeatedly. As though it was provoked, the saber chi turned even wilder. Crack, crack, crack. The phantom of the Demon Kings dispersed. The next moment, an even more terrifying aura appeared. Behind Suzimo, a blood-colored butterfly appeared. It seemed illusory and surreal with two crescent moons imprinted on its wings. Instantly, the seawater calmed down, frozen solid as though it was shocked by the aura. The blood-colored butterfly flapped its wings gently and the saber chi within Suzimo's body was suppressed, going silent instantly. With that, the blood-colored butterfly disappeared, as though it had never appeared to begin with. Now that the saber chi was no longer aggressive, all that remained within Suzimo's body was the purest spirit energy. It was as vast as the sea. The spirit energy within Suzimo's dantian was increasing rapidly. He had just advanced to 5 Meridian Foundation establishment, but right now, his 5th spirit meridian was completely filled with pure and rich spirit energy. As spirit energy surged, his 6th spirit meridian started to appear faintly. A long time later, there was a loud boom. The 6th spirit meridian was unlocked beneath his green robes. 6 Meridian Foundation establishment. Suzimo was stunned. He had broken through in both his immortality and demonic cultivation. Although he was now at the bottom of the sea, the pressure he was experiencing decreased greatly. Suzimo continued advancing against the currents. Before long, the spirit sea changed once more. As though an invisible pair of hands had reached into the spirit sea to stir it forcefully, a gigantic vortex was formed, affecting the entire sea. Suzimo was sucked into it and merely felt the world spin. His entire body was contorted by the power of the vortex and felt like it was about to explode. His tendons and bones sounded at the same time as his organs shifted positions. Hurriedly, Suzimo released his blood chi to contain the injuries within his body. He channeled the mystic classic of the 12 demon kings of the great wilderness, and his head shone with 5 mysterious glows. Of the 7 orifices, only his eye orifices were dim without light. If he had not broken through earlier on, Suzimo would have been shredded after being sucked in by the vortex. The change in the spirit sea attracted countless stares once more. The vortex was way too terrifying, resembling a black hole that threatened to devour the entire universe. How could this be? I heard from my master that 1,000 years ago, a similar phenomenon appeared after the cultivator who obtained the Saber Emperor's inheritance entered the spirit sea. You mean to say, look, there seems to be someone inside the vortex. On the reef, Bayu's expression turned extremely terrible. Chapter 393, Sea Calming Manual. Chapter 393, Sea Calming Manual. Initially, Suzimo was already experiencing pressure from the water resistance at the bottom of the sea. That pressure was the reason why he was able to clear his mouth orifice, one of the 7 orifices. After he was sucked into the vortex, Suzimo experienced even greater pressure, and with no other choice, he could only channel the mystic classic of the 12 demon kings of the great wilderness furiously to deal with it. Flesh and blood expansion, twitching of tendons, trembling of bones, swapping of blood in the marrow, refinement of the 5 organs, and clearing of the 7 orifices. Under the stimulation of the vortex, endless demonic chi rushed towards his head, striking the eye orifices again and again. After a long time, Suzimo, who was trapped uncontrollably within the vortex, opened his eyes suddenly and 2 divine lights burst forth, illuminating the entire dark sea. All 7 of his orifices were cleared. His skin, flesh, tendons, bones, marrow, organs, and orifices entered a synthetic relationship, forming a major heavenly cycle within his body and attaining lesser mastery of the orifice-clearing section. Although the vortex was still present, Suzimo was rooted to the spot. He did not budge no matter how the seawater washed, spun, and twisted around him. Now that his 7 orifices were cleared, the feeling of dizziness vanished instantly. In a moment of emotion, Suzimo could not help but roar into the skies. His roar was so high-pitched that it pierced through metal and cracked rocks. In fact, it overwhelmed the surging sound of the sea. The cultivators who were standing at the shore could not help but shiver with shocked expressions when they heard the howl. They no longer had any doubts. That man is still alive. Is he going to be the second person to obtain the Saber Emperor's inheritance? The fiend heir of Zenith's sect, by you, sat on the reef, looking grim in silence. Look! Suddenly, someone yelled and pointed to the depths of the spirit sea. Everyone looked over and saw that the vortex that resembled a black hole was moving slowly towards the Saber Mountain, as if it was being pushed by some unknown force. What's going on? Everyone was confused and could not understand what was happening. If any cultivator could fly above the spirit sea and look down at that moment, they would be greeted with a shocking sight. In the middle of the vortex, a green-robed cultivator was striding casually at the bottom of the sea. Hands behind his back, his eyes were bright, and he was surrounded by demonic chi. Each step he took pushed the vortex forward a little bit. The entire spirit sea was being moved by him. Time passed by slowly. In the blink of an eye, a day and night had passed. By now, the vortex had arrived at the foot of the Saber Mountain, and in front of everyone, a black dot figure walked out from the spirit sea towards the mountain. He had passed. After 1,000 years, there was another cultivator who passed the Saber Emperor's test and was about to obtain the latter's inheritance. At the shore, many cultivators were dumbstruck and their eyes flashed with a hint of jealousy. Bayu narrowed his eyes and his gaze shimmered. Nobody knew that the shock in his heart was even greater right now. It was because he had heard that 1,000 years ago, the senior from Zenith's sect who obtained the Saber Emperor's inheritance was completely exhausted by the time he crossed the Spirit Sea. He had to rest for 7 days to recover his energy before ascending the mountain. But right now, this man before him actually had the energy to ascend the mountain right after crossing the Spirit Sea. He has to die. Closing his eyes, Bayu thought to himself. He knew slightly more about the Saber Emperor's inheritance than the other cultivators. It was said that the Saber Emperor left 2 secret arts at the top of the mountain. One of them was a secret mental technique and was already obtained by the senior from Zenith's sect. It was said that the other one was a saber technique with 5 stances. In other words, the inheritance that Zemo was about to acquire was the 5 stances. The more profound a saber technique was, the harder it would be grasp it. Furthermore, there were different levels of mastery to the saber technique as well. Bayu believed that even if Zemo managed to learn the 5 stances in the short term, he would not be able to master the essence of it. Since his cultivation realm is still low, and he isn't familiar with the saber technique yet, now is the best chance to kill him. Taking a deep breath of air, Bayu assumed a lotus position. He planned on waiting by the shore to kill Zemo the moment the latter returned with the inheritance. Mountain Peak. It was empty and desolate with a single stone tablet. The stone tablet was etched with a vivid painting. It was a burly man bearing his chest uninhibitedly as he sat alone by the seaside. With a saber laid horizontally across his knees, he held a jar of wine in his left hand and watched the sea wistfully with a hint of worry. Although he had never seen the Saber Emperor in person, Zemo knew the moment he saw the painting that the burly man was the Saber Emperor. Walking forward, Zemo stroked the stone tablet gently with his palm. The coarse surface of the stone tablet related to him the signs of time passing by. Suddenly, Zemo froze on the spot. A thought surged into his mind. Somebody else has finally arrived here after 1,000 years, sigh. That sigh was one of gratification and emotion, but mostly of relief. The ancient war destroyed the Tao of the 100 weapons, leaving the sword to reign supreme. I am about to cross far beyond the South Sea, and I don't wish for the way of the saber to be lost in Tianhuang mainland. As such, I've left behind my inheritance. There are 2 manuals here that await those with affinity. Zemo knew that this was only a remnant thought left behind by the Saber Emperor. The first manual, the title manual, is a secret mental technique that has already been imparted to that person 1,000 years ago. The second manual, the Sea Calming Manual, is a saber technique with 5 stances. Today, I shall impart it to you. Suddenly, the voice vanished and an image appeared before Xuantian's eyes. The burly man stood on the Saber Mountain, holding the saber casually as he leaped into the spirit sea. His eyes shone brightly and the wistfulness in his eyes was gone, replaced with a sharp glint as he charged against the current and slashed forward. Swoosh! The seawater split to the sides, creating a blank area, whipping the saber to cut the water. At the same time, the Saber Emperor's voice sounded, first stance of the Sea Calming Manual, Countercurrent. After Countercurrent, the Saber Emperor waved the saber and circled around his body. Instantly, the seawater stirred up huge waves that splashed in all directions. Second stance of the Sea Calming Manual, Raging Tides. Immediately after, the Saber Emperor retracted his saber and slashed forward once more. The angle of this slash was unique, as if it was striking thin air as it twisted and spun. As the slash landed, the spirit sea started spinning, forming a gigantic vortex as though it was pulled by something. Third stance of the Sea Calming Manual, Vortex. Upon seeing this, Xuantian suddenly had an epiphany. He had experienced those stances personally in the process of crossing the spirit sea. Crossing the spirit sea was not just a test, but also an inheritance on its own. Fourth stance of the Sea Calming Manual, Ripple. Fifth stance of the Sea Calming Manual, Sea Calming. In the blink of an eye, all 5 stances were performed. The Saber Emperor's voice continued ringing. Although there are only 5 stances to the Sea Calming Manual, my life's knowledge has been infused in them. It's the great Tao of the saber created by simplifying everything and returning to the basics. If you are able to comprehend the first 4 stances, that will be enough for you to roam freely in the cultivation world. If you can comprehend the final stance, even the world will be your oyster. Chapter 394, Imminent Danger. Chapter 394, Imminent Danger. In the Tao of the 100 weapons, be it the sword or the saber, there are 3 levels of mastery to them: form, force, and intent. The Saber Emperor's voice continued sounding. By form, it means the stance of the saber techniques. This is the most superficial of the mastery levels, and as long as a cultivator is willing to practice diligently, they will be able to attain proficiency and utilize it naturally. Force is the second level and is rather abstract. It could be understood as the force of the chi, aura, or sound, and it's not something that everyone can achieve. Some people spend their entire lives without understanding the meaning behind the idea of force. At the level of force, the might of your saber technique will be even mightier, reaching a whole new tier of mastery. The third level is intent. Similar to sword intent, the saber has saber intent as well. Simply put, this is the realm of one's intent, and it's formless and ethereal. A single slash can contain the might of the universe. The obscurity of the intent realm can only be understood after one cultivates their essence spirit. One had to be at nascent soul realm at the very least if they wanted to achieve the third level of mastery. For now, Xuantian did not have to think about that at all. Right now, all he had to do was master the first 2 levels of cultivating saber techniques. Whipping out Blood Quencher, Xuantian recalled the 5 stances performed by the Saber Emperor and began practicing on the mountain peak. As the Saber Emperor had said, even though there were only 5 simple stances, executing a perfect version of even one of them was extremely difficult. At the same time, Xuantian finally understood why the Saber Emperor had to lay down a test as such. The Sea Calming Manual's requirement on one's physique was way too high. Although Countercurrent was a starting move, a person's arm would explode if their physique was not strong enough. Even after lesser mastery of the orifice clearing section, Xuantian could only use it while channeling his bloodline. That single slash required every single muscle on his body to move. Of course, that was not the only difficulty to executing a perfect version of the stance. There must not be any deviations to the degree of his motions, the timing and angle of his slash, as well as the strength used. Any single mistake and the saber technique would not be able to be executed. Xuantian practiced repeatedly. Fortunately, he had experienced Countercurrent, Raging Tides, Vortex, and Ripple personally while crossing the Spirit Sea, and they were comparatively simpler to understand. After 10 days of not resting and sleeping, Zimo could finally manage to perform the first 4 stances. Although he was not entirely familiar with the first 4 moves, a little inexperienced in fact, he had still succeeded. However, during this period of time, no matter how Zimo adjusted, recalled, and practiced, he could not perform the final stance, Sea Calming. Although it was a simple slash, Zimo could not do it no matter what. He was not discouraged. According to the Saber Emperor, Sea Calming was the essence of the Sea Calming manual, and the world would be one's oyster if they could comprehend it. What sort of a level was that? It was most likely beyond everything that Zimo knew. In that 10 days, apart from Zimo, there was also a burly man on the peak, watching Zimo practice silently without saying a single word. After 10 days, when he saw that Zimo was able to perform the first 4 stances of the Saber technique completely, a look of comfort finally flashed through the burly man's eyes. "Very good, you are very good." The Saber Emperor nodded, and his voice gradually dimmed. At the same time, his figure faded rapidly and disappeared from the world. Retracting his saber, Zimo bowed deeply in the direction where the figure of the Saber Emperor disappeared. The next moment, the Saber Mountain collapsed and the Spirit Sea evaporated. Standing on thin air, Zimo felt a sense of sadness fill him. After imparting the title and Sea Calming manual, the final traces of that supreme paragon of the ancient era had disappeared from Tianhuang mainland as well. On the shore, many cultivators looked at the scene unfold with shock and remained silent for a long time. The Saber Mountain Spirit Sea disappeared before their very eyes at a visible speed. The Saber Mountain crumbled into rubble and the Spirit Sea dried up, with Spirit Chi returning to nature. From this day forth, the Saber Mountain Spirit Sea no longer existed in Tianhuang mainland. It was fortuitous that everyone managed to witness it. Descending on the ground, Zimo fell into deep thought, pondering about the second level stated by the Saber Emperor, Force. Under normal circumstances, there was no need for Zimo to try and comprehend the second level since he was still very amateurish with the first 4 stances and had yet to achieve the first level. However, he felt a sense of déjà vu towards the comprehension of force. Back when he was studying in Pingyang Town, Zimo often practiced calligraphy. In calligraphy, there was a saying of the 9 forces, relating to the movement of the brush tips and the way of writing. The 9 forces were about mastering the landing, reverse, hiding of the tip, protecting the body, weakening the stroke, raising the brush, the ending stroke, and the horizontal finish. Even without the guidance of a master, one can arrive at the sweet spot of calligraphy as long as they practice diligently. In reality, the forces mentioned by the Saber Emperor, as well as the 9 forces of calligraphy, were rather similar. In the world, there were many theories that were interconnected. That was also what the common saying in the cultivation world, "all things come together," meant. Under normal circumstances, ordinary cultivators wouldn't be able to comprehend the meaning of force, much less attempt at that level, without first familiarizing themselves with their saber techniques. However, Zimo was a scholar before entering the cultivation world and had studied the 9 forces of calligraphy before. The concept of force was not one that Zimo was foreign with. Therefore, he attempted to comprehend the meaning of force before he was familiar with the saber techniques of the Sea Calming manual, trying to grasp at something. Closing his eyes, Zimo entered an indescribable state of bliss. This was an extremely rare state of enlightenment. He would definitely gain something the moment he awakened. After the Saber Mountain Spirit Sea vanished, Zimo had already attracted everyone's attention. When he entered the enlightenment state, everyone was in an uproar. Entering that state right now was definitely trouble rather than blessing for Zimo. There was no one around Zimo to protect him, and any external stimulation could disrupt his enlightenment process, putting his efforts to vain. Furthermore, that was secondary. The most important thing was that someone was out to take his life. Since the heavens want you to die, you can't blame me. Yu smiled sinisterly and in a flash, pulled out a cold gleaming saber from his storage bag, speeding towards Su Zimo. When he approached, Yu slashed horizontally. That slash was not fast, nor was it strong. Furthermore, it did not have any killing intent at all. Yu was worried of alarming Su Zimo, who was in his enlightenment state, changing the current situation. He wanted to kill in stealth. Su Zimo's eyes were still tightly shut, as if he had not realized that danger was knocking right on his door. At the sight of that, many cultivators shook their heads and sighed. Initially, Su Zimo was the envy of many after obtaining the Saber Emperor's inheritance. However, who would have thought that he would die in the blink of an eye? At the end of the day, fate had played a trick on him. Yu smirked in glee when he saw that the blade was about to slice Su Zimo's throat. "You're still going to die in my hands, even if you've obtained the Saber Emperor's inheritance," Yu sneered. Just as the blade was about to cut Su Zimo's throat, the latter's figure suddenly retreated without warning and narrowly avoided that fatal strike. Narrowing his gaze, Yu's expression changed. Chapter 395, Countercurrent Force. Chapter 395, Countercurrent Force. Yu could clearly see that the blade had already cut off the hair on Su Zimo's skin. A slight inch forward was all that was required to slice the latter's throat. However, the attack had still missed. It was a mere centimeter gap. The strangest thing was that Su Zimo had not opened his eyes throughout the entire process. It was as though he had dodged the attack subconsciously. With a lowered head, Su Zimo resembled a meditating old monk, immersed in his own world and totally oblivious to his surroundings. Still trying to gain enlightenment? Yu sneered and no longer concealed the killing intent in his heart. Channeling his bloodline, his spirit saber buzzed and trembled, cutting towards Su Zimo with full force as it shimmered brightly with spirit light. The attack was extremely fast and was almost instant. Swash! Su Zimo's expression was unchanged and his body fluttered like a willow catkin, evading that murderous attack from Yu with his eyes still closed. Yu frowned. He truly could not comprehend Su Zimo's current state. Su Zimo's eyes were closed and could not see the trajectory of the saber. Even if he was making use of his hearing to judge the wind, there was no way he would be able to dodge the attack as such. However, for some reason, he avoided it again. If the first time was a coincidence, the consecutive 2 attacks. Dodge? Let's see how long more you can manage to dodge. Yu strode forward and his saber trembled, giving off the faint stench of blood and enveloping Su Zimo within it. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. Yu struck consecutively, unleashing Zenith Saber, his Sect's secret skill. The slashes were relentless, fatal, and came at sinister angles. Despite the circumstances, Su Zimo did not open his eyes and continued retreating. However, as time passed by, the available space for Su Zimo to dodge diminished, and he was gradually shrouded by Yu's saber technique with nowhere to run. All the cultivators watching were puzzled by the fight. To be exact, it wasn't a fight. After all, one party was dodging right from the start without attacking at all. That person sure has guts. To think that he's still trying to get enlightened at a time like this. He really has a death wish. His eyes are clearly closed, but it seems as though he can sense danger. It's as though he's got some divine sense. How did he do it? To everyone, it seemed as if Su Zimo had keen senses that allowed him to dodge with ease. In truth, Su Zimo was currently in a pseudo-state of slumber. The moment Yu attacked him, his spirit perception had already warned him, and he could have awakened completely from his state of enlightenment. However, this was an extremely rare opportunity. Su Zimo could sense that he was just a little bit away from understanding the secret of force. Therefore, Su Zimo forcefully ignored the disruptions of the outside world, dodging subconsciously with his sharp spirit perception while wholeheartedly focusing on his enlightenment. It was an extremely dangerous decision, and one that was overly mad. Any single mistake, and he would be dead on the spot. By then, whether or not he was enlightened would no longer have any meaning. The reason why he could hold out for so long against the attacks of Zenith Sects heir was because he had cleared his 7 orifices and attained lesser mastery of the orifice clearing section, resulting in an increase of his strength and speed. However, he was bound to fall if this carried on. Bayu's saber techniques turned increasingly lethal as the blood stench of his blade increased. Su Zimo's available space to retreat shrank repeatedly, and he was now only moving around an extremely limited radius. It was a highly dangerous situation. However, he had yet to comprehend the secret behind force. He had to make a decision. All of a sudden, a thought flashed through Su Zimo's mind. Bayu's attacks resembled the undercurrent at the bottom of the sea, surging forward wave after wave relentlessly. Su Zimo recalled the difficulty he had advancing at the bottom of the sea against the undercurrent, and suddenly, thoughts of realization entered his mind. Countercurrent stance. The secret of the stance was mostly in the word counter. What was counter? The fact that cultivators wanted to abandon their mortal bodies to become immortal and break free from the constraints of the universe, that was counter. Counter meant not retreating and fighting furiously forward. Su Zimo's entire journey had been one of countering. Back in Pingyang Town, his knees refused to buckle and his spine refused to bend against perfected being Tsonglang's bullying. That was his counter. Countering meant an immensely fearless aura. In truth, everything that happened in Pingyang Town back then could not be hidden from Dayu's senses. Back then, if Su Zimo had chosen to kneel and submit, Dayu would have killed perfected being Tsonglang on the spot, ending her karma with Su Zimo before leaving. However, the counter that Su Zimo made was the reason why he received Dayu's acknowledgement and changed his fate. One could only change their fates by countering the heavens. One could only obtain the rights to change their fates if they dared to counter even the heavens. Those who obeyed the will of the heavens would become mortals, while those who countered it would become immortals. Countering meant not bowing down, not retreating, not fearing, not buckling. It was an invincible march of courage and strength forward. The countercurrent stance could counter the situation. At that moment, Su Zimo no longer had anywhere to run or hide. When he saw that, Bayu's eyes shone with a frenzied glint as he laughed menacingly. Nowhere left to hide? Now, die. Swoosh. The saber in Bayu's hands slashed forward with multiple afterimages and blood chi spread, filling the skies with the stench of blood. All of a sudden, Su Zimo's eyes jerked open. His eyes were clear and bright, like crystals deep in the sea that shone with a mysterious luster. There was no trace of fear nor panic in them. When he saw those eyes, a sense of uneasiness flashed through Bayu's heart. Unknowingly, perhaps when Su Zimo opened his eyes, a blood-colored saber had appeared in his hands. Its blade was gigantic and shone with 5 spirit lights in a bedazzling manner. Countercurrent, Su Zimo said calmly and waved casually. Swoosh. As Blood Quencher moved, there was a sound of tides surging in a reverse current coming from its blade. Initially, Bayu had the advantage with his domineering momentum. However, the situation between them was instantly reversed with Su Zimo's slash. A torrential force crushed forward like a surging tide alongside Blood Quencher. All the afterimages from Bayu's saber disappeared instantly. The blood stench emitted from his saber was washed away completely by the invisible tide as well. Against that massive force, Bayu's saber technique appeared simple and weak. Saber force. Bayu's eyes widened in shock. How was that possible? He joined Zenith Sect when he was 5 years old and had been practicing with a saber since then. After being immersed in the way of the saber for dozens of years, he had merely reached the peak of the first level of mastery of the saber and had not managed to reach the secret of force yet. However, the person before him had comprehended the meaning of saber force after cultivating for a mere 10 days. In the face of the saber force, all saber techniques were merely in form no matter how precise they were. The two sabers collided. Clang! Bayu's body shuddered, and his face turned incomparably pale. Spitting out a mouthful of blood, he flew away limply and his gaze dimmed. Pissed. The cultivators watching were dumbstruck. A single slash. Bayu's initial advantage was gone after Su Zimo opened his eyes, and within a single slash, he was the one that was sent flying and severely injured. Chapter 396, Change in Xuantian City. Chapter 396, Change in Xuantian City. The difference was too great. Initially, Bayu's only advantage was in his Saber technique. But now, after Su Zimo comprehended the countercurrent force, Bayu's advantage was non-existent. Furthermore, Su Zimo's strength had increased significantly after attaining lesser mastery of the orifice clearing section. Right now, he was crushing Bayu completely. Even though it was just a single slash, he had already injured Bayu severely. With a cold gaze, Su Zimo flashed forward and raised his saber, chasing after Bayu. Bayu's face was ghastly pale with fear. Looking at Su Zimo, who was charging over, his eyes flashed with determination as he bit his tongue gently, spitting out a stream of essence blood. Dong! 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 Bayu's chest heaved up and his heart pounded furiously. With every single pound, new blood would course through his limbs. On the surface of the blood burned a thin layer of flames that possessed endless energy. Blood escape? Su Zimo narrowed his eyes. He knew the best about the secret skill used by Bayu. In that ancient coffin underground, Su Zimo obtained the Blood Refinement Fiend Sutra, and this secret skill was recorded in it. Back then, during the battle at Dongling Valley, Su Zimo also relied on blood escape to escape, ending up in the capital of Great Zhou by chance and avoiding his disaster. Once released, blood escape would burn up a third of the body's bloodline in exchange for a momentary speed burst, allowing one to escape hundreds of kilometers away. Sure. Bayu turned into a streak of blood and sped off into the distance. In the blink of an eye, he had already fled 1,000 feet away. It was too fast. Back then, Su Zimo even managed to shrug off golden cores with the speed he gained by using blood escape. Right now, Su Zimo had two options if he wanted to chase Bayu. First, turn into his demon form and unleash his blood chi. Second, unleash blood escape as well in pursuit. After considering carefully, he found neither options feasible. The first option would bring him too much trouble since there were thousands of cultivators around. The second option was not worth it. After a slight delay, Su Zimo gave up on hunting Bayu and put away his blood quencher, pulling out a gigantic moon-white bow from his storage bag. The fact that he did not continue chasing did not mean that Su Zimo was going to let Bayu off. He bent the bow and loaded an arrow. 5 spirit lights shone in Su Zimo's embrace, as if he was hugging a full moon. Swoosh! A sharp arrow tore through the air. It was a heart-piercing arrow. Given Su Zimo's arm strength, coupled with the quasi-connate spirit weapon, Moon Concealment Bow, the arrow shot out at lightning speed, piercing towards Bayu's back. Bayu, who was in blood escape, sensed something and crushed a protection talisman. Boom! The arrow exploded with a loud bang after striking the protection talisman. Bayu's body shuddered and he coughed out blood once more, staggering and nearly falling. Laughing into the skies, Su Zimo declared loudly, "All right, you're lucky since you've managed to dodge that arrow. I'll spare your life today. Also, it's all thanks to your help that I'm able to comprehend the countercurrent force." If it wasn't for Bayu's relentless attacks that forced Su Zimo to have nowhere to retreat, he might not have been able to gain enlightenment on the force that could counter that desperate situation. Bayu paused slightly and turned to look at Su Zimo with a hateful gaze. Sensing Bayu's gaze, Su Zimo smiled faintly. "You had better hide yourself in the ancient battlefield from now on. Don't let me see you again, or you won't even get the chance to release blood escape the next time we meet." Gritting his teeth hatefully, Bayu roared and turned forward to continue sprinting. That speck of blood in the air disappeared from everyone's sights before long. In reality, Bayu was most likely doomed even without Su Zimo chasing him. The sequela of blood escape was rather terrifying. Be it humans or demons, burning up a third of their bloodlines would cause them to turn extremely weak. Dangers lurked everywhere in the ancient battlefield. Unless Bayu manages to find an absolutely safe place before blood escape ends, he would be dead without a doubt. Putting away the moon concealment bow, Su Zimo left leisurely in front of everyone's shocked gazes. He had received immense gains for this trip. Right now, the only things left to do was to familiarize himself with the 5 stances and comprehend the force of the other 4 stances. Every stance corresponded to a different force. Naturally, the intents were different as well. Taking a deep breath of air, Su Zimo compared against the map and sped toward Xuantian City. I've only left the city for 10 some days. I hope nothing has changed. That was what Su Zimo hoped. North of Xuantian City. Back hall of Elixir Yang Sect. It was a hubbub of noise, with cultivators berating occasionally in a seemingly furious tone. There were even the roars of spirit beasts mixed in, and it was shocking. In a corner of the back hall, a woman was leaning to the side. She had a petite frame. Her face was pale. Her lips were purple and her eyes were tightly shut. It was unknown if she was alive. That was Su Xiaoning. In front of Xiaoning was a tall and strong demon beast with pitch-black scales all over its body. It resembled a wolf and a tiger with extremely sharp claws and teeth as it surveyed the surrounding with its pitch-black eyes and hostility. That was none other than Night Spirit. Night Spirit stood in front of Xiaoning, and its tail swayed gently with traces of blood shimmering at its tip. Not far in front of Night Spirit, a corpse laid on the floor with Elixir Yang Sect's badge on his waist. There was a bloodied hole in his glabella with warm blood oozing out of it. It was clear that the person was just killed by Night Spirit not long ago. Yin Jun stood opposite Night Spirit along with a group of Elixir Yang Sect disciples, all of them looking furious and agitated. Damned beast, you truly don't know what's good for you, just like your master. Yin Jun scolded coldly. A cultivator shouted, Beast, how dare you kill a disciple of Elixir Yang Sect? You'll pay for his life with yours. The other cultivators pointed at Night Spirit and scolded as well. Although each of them wielded their flying swords, none of them dared attack recklessly. Everyone had witnessed the way the cultivator from earlier died. He was killed by Night Spirit before he could even take out his flying sword. Sensing the hostility from everyone present, Night Spirit's gaze was cold as it opened its mouth slightly, letting out a chilling growl from the depths of its throat. Given Night Spirit's violent character, it should be engaged in a massacre right now instead of enduring the scoldings and humiliation of these cultivators. There were multiple times when Night Spirit lowered its body, entering a stance prepared to pounce. However, it swallowed everything back inside. It turned back and glanced at Su Xiaoning from time to time, worried about her safety. In fact, there was a trace of worry and guilt in its eyes. Night Spirit patrolled around Xiaoning. From that angle, it could block against any incoming threats. Right then, an Elixir Yang Sect disciple came beside Yin Jun and said deeply, Senior Brother Yin, let's ignore that Su Zimo and join hands to kill this demon beast. No matter how strong this beast is, there's no way it can defend against so many of us, right? That's right. Another cultivator nodded. We can't let Junior Brother Pooh die just like that. Everyone, let's work together to kill this beast as revenge for Junior Brother Pooh. With a darkened expression, Yin Jun pondered for a moment. Suddenly, he raised his palm and said coldly, Everyone prepare. Chapter 397. Good Kill. Chapter 397. Good Kill. Hold on. A figure strode in swiftly from outside the door. Although she wore men's clothes, her eyes resembled a painting and her features were delicate. That was none other than the commander of Elixir Yang Sect, Tang Yu. Sweeping her gaze, she frowned when she saw the dead Elixir Yang Sect disciple on the floor. When she finally caught sight of Xiaoning, her expression changed starkly as she yelped, Purple corpse corrosion poison. Uncle Liang nodded with a grim expression. Her face is pale and her lips are purplish. That's right, it should be one of Poison Sect's 7 lethals, the purple corpse corrosion poison. Tang Yu was initially in seclusion cultivation, but only found out that something big had happened after she was summoned urgently. She heard from her fellow disciples that Xuantian was met with an attack on the long street at the city's north. Although the attacker was killed by Night Spirit on the spot, Xuantian was inflicted by the poison. To think that it's Poison Sect. Tang Yu's face darkened with a terrible expression. Right now, the north side of Xuantian City was watched over by Elixir Yang Sect and Thousand Crane Sect. As such, Tang Yu was initially puzzled as to who would attack so brazenly in the city's north. She did not expect that it would be one of the 5 heretical doctrines, Poison Sect. Although Poison Sect disciples were not strong in head-on combat, many factions and cultivators were unwilling to be enemies with them. Poison Sect had 7 lethals. Every single lethal was extremely fatal, and one would die upon touch. Furthermore, Poison Sect disciples were extremely cunning and ruthless. They specialized in hidden weapons and were very stealthy. It was way too simple if Poison Sect disciples wanted to kill anyone. A casual contact while eating, drinking, or even breathing. Every common action could cause one their lives. Even for Foundation establishment cultivators, if they were careless, they could be poisoned by the Chi refinement warriors of Poison Sect and die unexpectedly. These were not uncommon examples. Most cultivators would run far away if they caught sight of Poison Sect disciple, since they did not want to be enemies or befriend the latter. Tang Yu did not understand why Xuantian would be targeted by disciples of Poison Sect. Any cultivator that could release the purple corpse corrosion poison definitely held a high status in Poison Sect. Why would Poison Sect send such a disciple to kill an elixir refinement master at late-stage Foundation establishment personally? Right then, Uncle Yang exclaimed softly, "That's strange. Given the toxic nature of the purple corpse corrosion poison, this girl should have already turned into a puddle of blood. Why is her corpse still intact without any signs of corroding?" Anyone who was inflicted by the purple corpse corrosion poison would die within 10 breaths. Their bodies would corrode, turning them into a puddle of blood, and even immortals would have difficulty saving them. Furthermore, the blood would also contain a rich amount of the purple corpse corrosion poison, and anyone tainted by it would die as well. Tang Yu looked at Xuantian for a while, deep in thought. She's still alive? It might have been an illusion, but the paleness of Xuantian's face and her purple lips seemed to have faded a little. How is that possible? Tang Yu had some understanding of the purple corpse corrosion poison. Even 8 Meridian Foundation establishment cultivators would most likely die if they were tainted by the poison, let alone a late-stage Foundation establishment cultivator like Xuantian. That was also the terrifying aspect of Poison Sect. What's going on? Pointing at the corpse on the floor, Uncle Yang turned around and asked. A cultivator stood forth and pointed at Night Spirit, who was standing not far away, declaring hatefully, "Junior Brother Pooh wanted to check on Xuantian's condition out of goodwill upon seeing that the latter was poisoned. However, this beast killed him straight away." Tang Yu frowned. That statement didn't sound like a big deal. To begin with, Night Spirit was a demon beast. It was highly likely that it might be triggered after its owner was injured and turned feral, attacking anyone wildly. However, Tang Yu felt that something was amiss. With a stern expression, Yin Jun shouted, "Uncle Yang, junior sister, Elixir Yang Sect is one of the 4 unorthodox groups. How can we let our disciples be killed wantonly, especially by a beast? Since it killed a fellow disciple of ours, it'll have to pay with its life." Pausing for a moment, Yin Jun continued, "That's Su Zimo's beast. Since his beast got into trouble, he can't escape responsibility after returning as well. That's right. We've got to take revenge for Junior Brother Pooh. Kill that beast. Kill it." Everyone from Elixir Yang Sect chanted agitatedly. The development of the events have gone far beyond Tang Yu's control. No matter what, Su Zimo's group were still outsiders. If she sided with Night Spirit, she wouldn't be able to convince the masses and quell their bloodthirst. Instead, it might lead to internal bloodshed within the sect. Biting her lip gently, Tang Yu frowned and felt flustered. For a moment, she did not know how she should handle this. Uncle Yang sighed internally when he saw this. Tang Yu was a talent of Elixir Yang Sect's younger generation. brilliant and smart, there were few things that could be hidden from her. However, she lacked decisiveness and dominance. There was no way for her to control the situation without those things. Suddenly, a figure appeared in Uncle Yang's mind. That man truly is... Uncle Yang could not continue. It was difficult for him to give an accurate evaluation of that person. Although he looked like a meek and demure scholar on the surface, he exuded an air of dominance deep from his spine. With sharp methods, he was decisive to kill. Everything else aside, that particular trait alone would rank him as the top 10 of the younger generation. Suddenly, a voice sounded from outside the main hall. "Who do you guys want to kill?" The voice was calm, neither loud nor soft. However, it suppressed the chaos in the main hall. Tang Yu shuddered and turned around with a flicker of joy in her eyes. An elegant green-robed cultivator strode in. The moment he entered the back hall, he swept a look with his lightning-cold gaze, and the place went quiet instantly. It was a mighty aura. Although it was indescribable, it could suppress everything. Su Zimo had returned. The moment they saw him, everyone recalled the sight from the bloody battle on the long street, and their courage weakened unconsciously. Everyone's gaze was on Su Zimo. Uncle Yang could make out a hint of fear and awe in the eyes of the disciples. After entering the back hall and witnessing Xiaoning's weak state, Su Zimo's eyes flashed coldly and killing intent surged. Tang Yu whispered, "Fellow Taoist Su, I was careless and did not send any sect disciples to watch over Xiaoning. I truly hadn't expected that she would be attacked by someone from Poison Sect." Su Zimo shook his head in silence with a dark expression. This matter was not Tang Yu's fault. If Xiaoning could be poisoned even with Night Spirit guarding her, nothing would have changed even if Elixir Yang sect disciples were assigned to accompany her. Although Tang Yu could not ascertain if Xiaoning was alive, Su Zimo had already cleared his 7 orifices and could clearly hear a faint heartbeat coming from Xiaoning's chest. Furthermore, her heartbeat was growing increasingly stronger. In other words, Xiaoning's condition was turning for the better. Su Zimo turned and walked to Xiaoning's side. He had barely taken a few steps when Yin Jun blocked his path in a flash, sneering provocatively. "Su Zimo, you had better stop with that attitude," Yin Jun shouted. "It's true that your sister is dead, but that was done by Poison Sect. It has nothing to do with us. However, all of us witnessed your beast killing our fellow disciple. Regarding that, you have to be accountable to Elixir Yang sect." "Is that so?" Expressionlessly, Su Zimo nodded. "Good kill." "What did you say?" Yin Jun's eyes were widened. "Get lost. You." Before Yin Jun could complete his sentence, Su Zimo reached out and slapped Yin Jun with his backhand. Instantly, Yin Jun was sent flying and landed in a corner, fainted. The place fell into an uproar. Chapter 398, Night Spirit's Blood. Chapter 398, Night Spirit's Blood. "Su Zimo, what are you doing? Audacious. How arrogant." Many Elixir Yang sect disciples shouted emotionally. No matter what, Yin Jun was a disciple of the sect's battle hall, and Tang Yu was the only one who was above him in status. He was not somebody that an outsider like Su Zimo could compare to. Tang Yu could clearly see that although Yin Jun's cheeks were swollen, he had merely fainted and did not sustain any severe injuries. Given Su Zimo's strength, if he truly wanted to kill in that distance, Yin Jun's head would have been smashed by that single slap. In other words, Su Zimo had already shown mercy. Taking a deep breath of air, Tang Yu declared, "Silence. Young master, he's only an outsider. How can he act so brazenly in our territory?" "That's right. He would have been killed by Glass Palace and Malevolent Earth Sect long ago, if not for the protection of Elixir Yang Sect." Fufu, Glass Palace and Malevolent Earth Sect are not the only ones. These two siblings seem like they've even offended Poison Sect. In the crowd, voices of dissent against Su Zimo continued sounding incessantly. "Shut up." With a dark gaze, Uncle Yang suddenly shouted. Although he was old with white hair and beard, His eyes were still bright and exuded a sense of authority. The chaotic place quietened gradually. All the Elixir Young sect disciples knew very well about the background of the old man before them. It was possible that they might protest against Tang Yu's decisions. However, even if the masses disagreed with the old man, the most they would do would be to grumble a little internally. Tang Yu said deeply, "This matter will definitely be accounted for in a bit. Everyone, please quieten down." After a brief pause, Tang Yu called back Su Zimo and frowned. "Xiaoning is afflicted with the purple corpse corrosion poison, one of the 7 lethals of poison sect. Be careful. The poison is extremely toxic and it's easy for you to get tainted if you are careless." Su Zimo nodded and walked to Xiaoning's side. Growl. Night Spirit slumped its head and let out a deep growl, feeling a little guilty. Su Zimo patted Night Spirit on the head while shaking his own. "It's not your fault. If it was an ordinary assassination attempt, there was no way it would have gotten past Night Spirit. However, poison sect cultivators were way too scheming, and there was no way to guard against them." In that short while, Xiaoning's expression had gotten much better. In fact, her cheeks were now redder, and her heartbeat was getting stronger. Her condition was improving. Uncle Yang was amazed when he saw that. The 7 lethals of poison sect could not be cured by any cultivators outside the sect. Throughout his life, Uncle Yang had never heard of anyone who had survived against the purple corpse corrosion poison. Furthermore, by the looks of it, the purple corpse corrosion poison seemed to be disappearing bit by bit from within Xiaoning's body. The purple color on Xiaoning's lips was fading, and there were merely a few drops of blood left on it. Although there were only a few drops of blood, Su Zimo could sense an extremely powerful energy. That was definitely not Xiaoning's blood. Su Zimo swept his gaze and looked at Night Spirit's wrist where there was a deep gash that had yet to fully recover. No wonder. Back when they just entered the ancient battlefield, Night Spirit had already displayed the terror of its bloodline where it could ignore the poison of the blood centipede and was immune to it. The reason why the purple corpse corrosion poison was being purged from Xiaoning's body should be because she drank Night Spirit's blood. That's not right either. Su Zimo thought again. The purple corpse corrosion poison was extremely toxic and would activate within 10 breaths. Although Night Spirit's blood could purge the poison from Xiaoning's body, it required a relatively longer time. How did Xiaoning manage to survive in between that period? After clearing his 7 orifices, Su Zimo's 5 senses turned even sharper. Now that he was closer, he could vaguely sense a warmth emanating from Xiaoning's chest along with a faint medicinal scent. That's it. Su Zimo was enlightened. The mysterious elixir furnace that Xiaoning possessed was still kept at her chest area. If he was not wrong, that warmth and medicinal scent should be emitted by the elixir furnace. The elixir furnace was also the reason why Xiaoning's heart artery was preserved until it could take in Night Spirit's blood to purge away the poison within. Su Zimo finally heaved a long breath and calmed down after ensuring that Xiaoning was all right. Turning around, he glared at the corpse on the ground. The bloodied hole on the glabella of the corpse was clear evidence that Night Spirit did it. "You want an explanation? Sure, I'll give you an explanation." Surveying his surroundings, Su Zimo said indifferently, "Night Spirit won't harm anyone for no reason. If that person is dead, it must be because he crossed Night Spirit's bottom line." Bullshit. An Elixir Yang sect cultivator with a long face hollered. Junior Brother Pooh was trying to head forward and check out of goodwill. "However, your beast killed him without any reason at all. We saw it for ourselves, and you're still trying to deny it?" Su Zimo smiled and glared at that guy sharply with a cold gaze, replying with a deep intent. It was true that he came forward to check things out. However, we don't know whether it was out of goodwill. What do you mean by that? A hint of panic flashed through that person's eyes. Su Zimo turned towards Tang Yu and asked, "Young Master Tang, you mentioned that the purple corpse corrosion poison is extremely toxic and contagious, right?" "That's right." Tang Yu nodded and her eyes flashed, as if she had thought of something. "Even you would be afraid of going forward casually, am I right?" Su Zimo continued asking. "Yes." Tang Yu admitted with a nod. Indeed, she did not dare to get close after realizing that Xuantian was inflicted with the purple corpse corrosion poison. It was not because she was cold-blooded, it was merely logic. Suddenly, Tang Yu's heart jolted, and she realized what was wrong. She murmured softly, "Why would junior brother Pooh be the first to head up and check something that even I wouldn't dare to?" Uncle Yang nodded in silence. Tang Yu continued, "Most importantly, there's no antidote available for the purple corpse corrosion poison. There's no reason for junior brother Pooh to head forward at all." Many Elixir Yang sect cultivators came to their senses when they heard that. They wouldn't have gone forward if it was them in that position. Furthermore, what was the point of risking their lives to head forward and check when they wouldn't be able to do anything about the poison either? Tang Yu's gaze turned cold as she glared at the corpse on the floor without saying anything more. Su Zimo's gaze flashed like lightning towards the long-faced cultivator and said slowly, "I'm guessing that the reason why the person went forward to check wasn't because Xuantian was poisoned. It was because Xuantian didn't die from the poison." The long-faced cultivator's expression changed slightly as his eyes flickered. He did not dare to meet with Su Zimo's gaze. Squinting his eyes, Su Zimo said word by word, "That person's killing intent appeared after finding out that Xuantian wasn't dead, and that was why he was killed by Night Spirit." Fellow Taoist, am I right? Su Zimo was intimidating. The long-faced cultivator forced a laugh. How would I know?" Walking slowly towards the long-faced cultivator, Su Zimo asked with a sinisterly dark gaze, "What are you afraid of?" "I'm not." "In this short period of time, your heart has been racing and your breathing turned hurried. You're clearly panicking. Also, I sensed your killing intent towards me a moment ago." By the time he was finished speaking, Su Zimo had already arrived in front of the long-faced cultivator. The person's face was frightfully pale as he stumbled backwards instinctively. Even the other cultivators could tell that he was looking guilty. Chapter 399. Go and die then. Chapter 399. Go and die then. The long-faced cultivator had not expected that Su Zimo would possess a spirit perception and had extremely keen senses towards something such as killing intent that was immaterial. It was logical that the other cultivators would feel hostile towards Su Zimo. However, the long-faced cultivator felt a killing intent. Uncle Yang sighed. "Yushan, come clean and you might still have a chance to live." The long-faced cultivator named Yushan was thoroughly panicked. He realized that his fellow sect mates that were standing beside him a moment ago had backed off, looking at him warily. Gulping, Yushan looked towards Su Zimo instinctively. Su Zimo's gaze was sharp as a knife, emitting a piercing glint with occasional flashes of lightning. It was unusually sharp and instantly penetrated the last line of defense in Yushan's heart. This was the invisible power of his gaze. This was a level that Su Zimo achieved after clearing his eye orifices and tempering them with demonic qi. In the mortal world, some hardened killers would often let out savage gazes such that ordinary people would feel fear upon meeting with their eyes. The eyes were interlinked with one's guts. Therefore, in a fight between two people, one might lose his courage if he was intimidated by the latter's gaze, revealing openings. In the pugilistic world, among postnatal and connate experts, there was a saying that one had to cultivate their eyes before cultivating their guts, and that technique was known as the gaze technique. In the cultivation world, techniques that could cultivate one's eyes were all secret skills. The bewitching eye from the pure maiden sect of the fiend sects and the enraged Vajra gaze of the Buddhist monasteries were renowned supreme dermic techniques. Demoness G rarely had to dirty her hands personally to kill. It was normal for her opponents to commit suicide after receiving a single gaze from her. Before clearing his 7 orifices, Su Zimo did even dare to look at Demoness G straight in the eyes casually. That was also why Su Zimo had headaches each time he saw Demoness G and tried to avoid her as much as possible. "Speak." Su Zimo took a step forward, his eyes sparkling like lightning as he shouted. He added a small portion of thunderclap kill into saying that word. Coupled with the fact that Su Zimo had already cleared his mouth orifice, That word exploded like thunder in Xuantian's ears. Xuantian was already extremely rattled by Su Zimo's gaze. Now that he was shouted at, he almost broke down as he knelt on the ground with a thud and a frightfully pale face. I was wrong. I was wrong. With a quivering voice, Xuantian spoke. Dukai of Poison Sect used the life-severing powder on me and junior brother Pooh, and he's the only one with the antidote. We had no choice either. Dukai of Poison Sect? Tang Yu frowned slightly and explained to Su Zimo. Dukai is the commander of Poison Sect's current expedition. At 7 Meridian Foundation establishment, his mastery in poison is deep and he's a savage person. Su Zimo was expressionless and nodded. When he saw that everyone ignored him, Xuantian turned even more fearful and said hurriedly, "Furthermore, I haven't done anything that betrayed the sect or harmed our fellow disciples." Dukai was merely targeting Su Zimo's group and said that he'll give us the antidote as long as can kill one of them. By that point, most of the doubts that everyone had were answered. The Elixir Yang sect cultivator that was killed by Night Spirit was also inflicted by the life-severing powder of Poison Sect that explained his actions earlier. Uncle Yang laughed coldly. You've already betrayed the sect by waiting until now to tell us everything. I'm afraid that you probably won't hesitate either if Dukai asked you to kill your fellow sect mates in exchange for the antidote. Many Elixir Yang sect disciples felt their hearts skip a beat and lingering fear. No, I won't. Xuantian was frantic and shook his head repeatedly. Tang Yu said with regret in her face, Junior brother Shi, you know that the life-severing powder isn't one of Poison Sect's 7 lethals. Although we don't have the antidote, we can ensure you won't lose your life until we return to the sect. Given the capabilities of our sect seniors, they will be able to help you remove the life-severing powder with ease. But you... I was wrong. I know that now. Xuantian begged continuously. Tang Yu frowned in reluctance when she saw his wretched state. Uncle Yang sighed internally. Tang Yu still lacked the determination to kill at the end of the day. No sect would spare someone like Xuantian easily. Just as Uncle Yang was about to step forth and make the decision to kill Xuantian on the spot for Tang Yu, Su Zimo's voice sounded darkly, since you're so afraid of death, go and die then. Suddenly, Su Zimo raised his leg and kicked Xuantian heavily against the chest. Snap! Xuantian was sent flying and slammed against the wall completely before sliding down with a trail of blood. His entire chest was sunk in as his eyes glazed over. With a tilt of his head to the side, he was dead on the spot. The cultivators watching were dumbfounded. Tang Yu opened her mouth, as if she wanted to say something. However, in the end, she merely sighed without saying anything. Yes, right then, in the corner, Xiaoning, who was initially sleeping, let out a drowsy sound. Su Zimo hurried over and squatted down. He placed his palm against Xiaoning's forehead before asking gently, Xiaoning, how are you feeling? Brother? Xiaoning opened her eyes slightly and could not see what was before her clearly yet, merely replying instinctively due to the familiarity of the voice. It's me. Su Zimo gripped Xiaoning's hand. A familiar warmth surged into her heart, and instantly, Xiaoning felt much more awake. She tried her best to open her eyes, and her lips twitched as she smiled. Brother, you're back? I'm fine, don't worry. Su Zimo found himself smiling uncontrollably when he saw Xiaoning smile. Pushing her fringe away endearingly, he asked with a slightly reproachful tone, Why were you so careless? Xiaoning stuck out her tongue and blinked multiple times. Coming towards them, Tang Yu took out a jade bottle. This is a great essence-nourishing elixir. Let Xiaoning consume it. Her body has just only purged away the poison and is still weak. Thank you so much. Su Zimo nodded and received the jade bottle before pouring out an elixir the size of a fingernail and feeding it to Xiaoning. There was still something on Tang Yu's mind as she could not help but ask, Fellow Taoist Su, did you guys have any feuds with Poison Sect? Standing up, Su Zimo could not help but recall the Poison Sect cultivator he killed in the Golden Core's cave abode back at the borders of the ancient battlefield. If you kill me, all of you will have to die on the ancient battlefield. Those were the last words of the poison sect cultivator. Suzimo did not hide anything and nodded. I killed a poison sect cultivator previously. No wonder. Enlightened, Tangyu said deeply, poison sect cultivators are sinister and vengeful. Any cultivator that's able to use the purple corpse corrosion poison must have a high position within the sect. That person has most likely arrived at the city's north to poison all of you to death. It's just a pity. In truth, Tangyu's guess was rather close. The poison sect cultivator's name was Luong, and he was also at 7 Meridian Foundation establishment. He was sent here to poison Suzimo's group to death, but he ended up coming across Night Spirit. The purple corpse corrosion poison was completely useless when used on Night Spirit. Luong could not even survive a single round before he was killed by Night Spirit on the spot. Chapter 400. Meet Yama. Chapter 400. Meet Yama. Suzimo asked, why haven't I seen anyone from Poison Sect previously? Poison Sect only entered Xuantian City a few days ago. I reckon it should be for the Elixir Pool Sect ruins as well. Tangyu looked at Suzimo and said, although they only have slightly over 100 people for this expedition, all Poison Sect cultivators are filled with poison and they specialize in killing opponents above their levels. Even super sects such as Glass Palace and Malevolent Earth Sect don't want to provoke them. In reality, Tangyu's statement was a reminder for Suzimo to not offend Poison Sect, lest he attract trouble and get himself killed. Suzimo smiled but did not say anything. Upon seeing that Suzimo did not seem to have taken anything in, Tangyu continued, actually, Poison Sect was the one who suffered an immense loss this time round. Not only did they lose a strong cultivator of the sect, Xiaoning is completely fine. I'm sure that they must be feeling cautious after that failure. In the coming period, as long as we strengthen our defenses, Poison Sect will not dare to attack us rashly. After a slight pause, Tangyu added, furthermore, even if you go and kill a few Poison Sect cultivators and return safely, so what? It's only for a moment of pleasure. Instead, you form a deep grudge with them that cannot be resolved. Thereafter, you will have to live life fearing that they might take revenge at any moment. It's not worth it. Yes. Suzimo nodded after pondering for a moment. You are right. Tangyu finally heaved a sigh of relief after Suzimo replied. She relaxed and revealed a bright smile. A glint flashed across Suzimo's eyes as he asked, what are the 7 lethals of Poison Sect? Poison Sect's 7 lethals refer to the 7 most powerful hidden weapons or poisons of Poison Sect. For Chi Refinement Warriors and Foundation Establishment Cultivators of Poison Sect, they can only make use of 2 of the 7 lethals, the Heart-Seeking Spike and the Purple Corpse Corrosion Poison. The Purple Corpse Corrosion Poison is a purplish-green powder and anyone who touches it will most likely die. Glancing at Su Xiaoning at the side, Tangyu suddenly stopped speaking. There was someone in front of them that managed to survive against the Purple Corpse Corrosion Poison. Tangyu knew that Su Xiaoning must have some sort of a secret on her body. However, she was smart and chose not to ask about it. Heart-Seeking Spike? Suzimo asked reminiscently, is it a blue-colored spike that is as thin as a cow's hair? That's right. Tangyu nodded. The terrifying part of the heart-seeking spike is not the poison coated on the needle, but itself. Itself? Suzimo furrowed his brows slightly. Tangyu explained, the heart-seeking spike is thin as a cow's hair. After entering one's body, it would flow along with the bloodstream until it ruptures the heart. It's useless even if one purges away the poison on the needle. The heart-seeking spike will still find its target and kill it. Suzimo nodded. That explained why he felt his heart skip a beat when he was faced with that blue needle the other day. The feeling did not come from the poison on the heart-seeking spike, but the needle itself. In that short while, Su Xiaoning had fallen asleep. With a flushed face and steadied breathing, she was looking better. Young Master Tang, help me take care of Xiaoning. I'll go out for a walk. All right. Tangyu nodded and did not think much about it, merely reminding Suzimo to not wander far and be careful. It was noon when Suzimo left Elixir Yang Sect. Standing at a street corner at the city's north, Zimo raised his head and looked at the sun expressionlessly. Instead of fearing the blinding sunlight, his eyes revealed coldness in them. Poison sect. Zimo spat out 2 words. He walked south along the long street of Xuantian City. The south of the city was originally guarded by 2 of the 5 heretical doctrines, Puppet Sect and Tomb Sect. A few days ago, Poison Sect entered Xuantian City and forcefully took over a part of the city's south territory. Originally, this place was green and filled with weeds growing rampantly. However, within a few short days after Poison Sect settled down, the grass had all withered and died. The entire place turned sinister and desolate, and even insects and ants disappeared, as if there were no signs of life apart from those of Poison Sect. This noon, a green-robed cultivator arrived. He looked elegant and scholarly, walking with one hand behind his back. That guy seems a little familiar. I think he's the one from the bloody battle on the long street. Zimo, was it? Yes, that's him. Strange. What is he doing at Poison Sect's territory? Far away, some cultivators noticed Zimo. After all, he was the only person in the territory of Poison Sect, and he was strikingly obvious with his green robes that did not match the attire of Poison Sect. Before long, in front of everyone's watchful eyes, Zimo arrived before the residence of Poison Sect. 2 Poison Sect cultivators whose faces looked pale and yellow stood on each side of the door. They stared at Zimo, who was approaching with disdain in their eyes. To them, Zimo looked extremely weak and did not seem like a threat. Furthermore, Zimo was not wearing a sect badge on his waist. In other words, this was not somebody from a super sect. What are you doing here? The Poison Sect cultivator on the left asked with a raised brow. Smiling gently, Zimo pointed to the residence and asked instead, "This is Poison Sect, right?" "So what if it is?" The other cultivator sneered. Without replying, Zimo asked again, "Is Dukai here?" "Insolent. You must have a death wish." The Poison Sect cultivators were enraged and shouted. The cultivator on the left hollered coldly, "The name of Senior Brother Du isn't something the likes of you can casually call out." The other cultivator added with a dark, sinister gaze, "Punk, you had better give me a reason not to kill you. Otherwise, I'll let you meet Yama in a moment." "Yama?" Zimo grinned. "Why wait a moment? I'll send you guys to meet him right away." Taking a step forward, Zimo suddenly extended his palm and swung it in reverse. With a thud, his arm whipped out like the trunk of a mystic elephant and smashed heavily against the head of the cultivator on the right. The person's brain juices splattered, and he died on the spot without uttering a single word. The cultivator on the left was flabbergasted. He had not expected Zimo to try and kill them in Poison Sect's territory. "You." He had just said a single word when Zimo had already closed in. Without saying anything, Zimo pushed him palm down on the person's head and exerted strength. Poof! The person's head was shoved inside his chest with his neck snapped. He was dead before his body even collapsed onto the ground. Indifferent even after killing 2 people, Zimo entered Poison Sect's residence with a calm expression. The cultivators that were watching from afar had agape mouths. They had yet to react to what just happened. After a brief moment, there was an uproar. Something is happening. Those 3 words were the only things left in the minds of those cultivators. They did not know what grudge Zimo had with Poison Sect. However, they knew that something shocking was about to happen in Xuantian City once more. Exchanging glances, the cultivators deployed movement techniques and scattered everywhere. Before long, the entire Xuantian City was about to find out about this. Chapter 401. Who is Dukai? Chapter 401. Who is Dukai? Xuantian City, North, Elixir Yang Sect. After settling Xuantian down, Tang Yu sent another order for all Elixir Yang Sect cultivators to be on their guard and watch out for anyone suspicious. She was extremely wary of Poison Sect. After all, It was hard to guarantee that Poison Sect wouldn't do anything extreme for revenge after losing a core disciple who could release the purple corpse corrosion poison. It was never wrong to plan ahead. Furthermore, after what happened, Tang Yu had an uneasy feeling. In fact, it was like a premonition that something big was about to happen. The atmosphere within Elixir Yang's sect became tense after Tang Yu's series of orders. Almost all the cultivators were activated. 10 people formed a small team while 100 people formed a large team as they took turns to patrol Elixir Yang's sect's area. Right then, 2 cultivators came together, a man and a woman. The man was handsome and the woman looked cold. They were Xuantian and Longrou. Xuantian was originally cultivating in his room, but he heard a commotion outside for a long time, as if something big had happened. He came out and asked around before finding out the news that Xiaoning was attacked and Su Zimo had returned. Instantly, he hurried forth to find out more about the details. Longrou was originally cultivating in Thousand Crane Sect and had only found out about this when she heard Thousand Crane Sect cultivators discussing about it. By the time she got here, she bumped into Xuantian. When Tang Yu saw the two of them, she greeted and nodded. "Fellow Taoists, you're just in time. I was about to warn you guys to watch out. Your group has been targeted by Poison Sect." "How is Xiaoning? I heard that she was poisoned?" Xuantian asked. "She's fine now." Tang Yu smiled. "She's currently asleep. I reckon she'll recover after resting for a couple of days." "What about Zimo?" Longrou suddenly asked. Tang Yu replied, "He said that he's going out for a walk. I guess he'll be back soon. Do you guys want to wait here for a while?" When they heard that, Xuantian and Longrou's expressions changed. The two of them exchanged glances. Both could tell of the worry in the other's eyes. "What's wrong?" Sensing something amiss through their gazes, Tang Yu could not help but ask. Xuantian said deeply with a solemn expression, "Zimo has most likely gone to cause trouble for Poison Sect." "Ah." Tang Yu was stunned for a brief moment before replying hesitantly, "It can't be, right?" Sighing gently, Xuantian shook his head. "You haven't known Zimo for long, so I guess you don't understand his character too well yet. Although he looks calm and gentle, he has a sharp edge in his bones. If it was anybody else, they might be able to suck it up after considering about Poison Sect's strength. But not Zimo." Longrou added, "Furthermore, Poison Sect targeted Xiaoning. Dragons possessed reverse scales, and anyone who touches it will die. Xiaoning was equivalent to Su Zimo's reverse scale." Recalling Su Zimo's attitude before he left, Tang Yu frowned. However, he seemed like he was rather calm and did not have any strong killing intent. How is that possible? Xuantian and Longrou shook their heads. Given Su Zimo's personality, there was no way he would let things go, especially after something happened to Xiaoning. Xuantian asked, "What did Zimo say to you before leaving?" "Nothing much. I urged him to calm down and told him that he would only be seeking a moment of pleasure even if he killed a few Poison Sect cultivators. Not only would it not help, he would even incur Poison Sect's maniacal revenge." After thinking, Tang Yu continued, "Furthermore, he even agreed to my viewpoint at that time and said that I was right." Xuantian's expression changed slightly as he took a deep breath of air. There should be no mistake. Zimo has definitely gone to Poison Sect. Huh. Tang Yu was confused. I'm guessing that Zimo merely said half of what's on his mind. He did not verbally say out the second half. What half? Tang Yu asked subconsciously. You were right, so I'll go and kill everyone from Poison Sect. Everyone? Tang Yu's expression changed starkly and her eyes were filled with shock. This fellow Taoist Su is alone. Wouldn't he most likely die by going there? There's bound to be countless hidden weapons and traps at Poison Sect's residence. Tang Yu was panicked and murmured, fellow Taoist Su is way too reckless. Even though he's indeed strong, Poison Sect cultivators are extremely sinister in their methods. He hasn't even heard of Poison Sect's 7 lethals. There's no doubt he'll be disadvantaged. I don't know whether he'll be disadvantaged. Xuantian shook his head. But what I do know is that this is something Su Zimo will definitely do. That's the type of reaction he should have. I'll go back and ask for backups from the 1,000 Crane Sect cultivators. Without wasting time, Long Ro turned to leave. Tang Yu composed herself and said in a deep voice, I'll gather forces right now and try to head to the city's south as soon as possible. I hope I'm not too late. City South, Poison Sect. In a spacious hall, the doors were tightly shut. Although it was noon and the sun was scorching outside, there was not much light within the hall, and it seemed dark and creepy. In the darkness deep within the hall, a voice sounded from the center. How long has Luong been gone for? The voice was sharp and feminine with a hint of coldness that made one shudder. Senior Brother Du, it's been almost 4 hours. A cultivator appeared and cupped his hands. That's long. The dark feminine voice sounded again, seemingly impatient. From what I know, there are 3 people in the city's north. Apart from Xuantian, there's also Xuantian and Long Ro. It'll probably take him some time to poison all 3 of them to death. The person who spoke was Wei Qi, a 6th Meridian Foundation establishment cultivator of Poison Sect. The person hidden in the darkness was the commander of Poison Sect's expedition, 7 Meridian Foundation establishment cultivator, Du Kai. Those are just small fries. The person I want to kill is Su Zimo. Du Kai's voice was filled with endless killing intent. Anyone who dares to touch anybody from Poison Sect will have to enjoy the taste of our methods. A short moment later, Du Kai asked again, where did that Su Zimo go to? Why isn't he back to the city yet? Don't worry, Senior Brother Du, his sister is in Xuantian City, so he'll definitely be back, Wei Qi replied with certainty. Right then, a commotion could vaguely be heard outside. Du Kai frowned and did not take it to heart. This was the territory of Poison Sect. Even super sects such as Glass Palace and Malevolent Earth Sect wouldn't dare to tread lightly. However, the commotion grew closer before long, and there were screams and cries of pain mixed in it. Du Kai narrowed his eyes and said coldly, Wei Qi, go and see what's happening outside. Understood. As soon as Wei Qi stood up, there was a loud bang and the ground shook. The entire hall was on the verge of collapse as dust rustled down. Suddenly, the door exploded and countless gravel flew in all directions. Sunlight spilled in, restoring some light in the hall. At the entrance of the hall, under the sunlight, stood a figure that, although wasn't too tall, was filled with a sharp killing intent and a torrential aura. Who is Du Kai? The person's gaze was burning and was even brighter than the scorching sun outside. Chapter 402. Who can stop me? Chapter 402. Who can stop me? In the hall, Wei Qi dodged multiple incoming rocks and looked extremely wretched as he turned his gaze towards the door. When he saw the intruder, he exclaimed in shock, Ah, it's Su Zimo. Du Kai was initially extremely composed deep in the hall. When he heard that name, his eyes narrowed to a slit and shone with a cold glint as he smirked cruelly. Su Zimo's eyes shifted onto Wei Qi's face and shone brightly with a sharp killing intent. In a flash, he appeared before the latter. It was too fast. Wei Qi merely felt his vision blur and his throat clamp up. He was lifted entirely from the ground with Su Zimo choking his throat. You've seen me before? Su Zimo asked coldly with a razor gaze. Poison Sect had only entered Xuantian City a couple of days ago, and during that time, Su Zimo was not in the city. He was on the Saber Mountain. It was normal for Poison Sect to have heard of his name. However, it was strange if someone knew his identity at first glance. With Su Zimo choking him, Wei Qi could barely breathe and looked extremely terrible. His eyes turned bloodshot and bulged out from their sockets as his tongue stuck out. I saw you before in that cave abode. Wei Qi stuttered with fear in his eyes. He knew extremely well that the person before him was going to snap his throat if he hesitated even slightly. Oh. Su Zimo nodded and understood instantly. There had always been a doubt in his mind. How did Poison Sect that was in the ancient battlefield know about him killing a cultivator of theirs in the Golden Core cave abode? So, there was a second Poison Sect cultivator in the crowd back then, In other words, the final statement made by the poison sect cultivator before his death was for this cultivator, so as to send a message back to the sect to take revenge for the former. Very well. You can die now. Exerting strength in his palm, Su Zimo crushed Wei Qi's throat and tossed the corpse aside. Right from the beginning, Du Kai sat deep in the hall without moving, watching everything curiously with a mocking gaze. Outside the hall, poison sect cultivators from all over the place were starting to gather. Su Zimo, you've got balls? To think that you would dare barge into the territory of poison sect. Hee hee. Du Kai laughed sinisterly, like a violent ghost in the dark. Poison sect? Su Zimo sneered. I can come and leave as I please. Who can stop me? Haha, how brazen. Do you really think that you can kill our cultivators just like that? Du Kai burst into laughter and stood up, declaring coldly, Poison sect cultivators are filled with poison from head to toe. You must have a death wish for killing our cultivator with your bare hands. Why don't you take a look at your palm and see if it's starting to turn black? I urge you. Su Zimo raised his palm, and Du Kai's voice stopped. His palm was still jade-like white and looked pristine without any traces of poison. Instantly, Du Kai's face darkened. Although the poison coated on Wei Qi's body was not one of the 7 lethals, it was more than enough to kill more than 10 ancient remnant beasts. In fact, even pure-blooded ferocious beasts might be half dead against this poison. However, Su Zimo was completely fine. He was completely unaffected. Du Kai had seen everything clearly. There was no glove or protective equipment on Su Zimo's palm. Even if he racked his brains, he would not have imagined that Su Zimo possessed such terrifying power in his bloodline. The toxic poison that could eliminate ancient remnant beasts was completely washed away by Su Zimo's immensely terrifying bloodline right after entering his body. Everyone else viewed Poison Sect as a great threat, but they were nothing much to Su Zimo. The 7 lethals of Poison Sect were the only things that could threaten him. Du Kai, was it? You don't have to wait for that Poison Sect cultivator to return anymore. He has already died on the long street in the city's north. Striding widely, Su Zimo advanced towards Du Kai. Additionally, my sister's life is in no danger. Sorry to disappoint you. Du Kai's gaze turned cold and suddenly, he stomped his feet just as Su Zimo was closing in. Instantly, a warning flashed through Su Zimo's mind as his legs stumbled. The floor had suddenly sunk in. It was already too late to summon his flying sword by then. With a whoosh, a pair of gigantic spirit wings extended from Su Zimo's back. Although there was nothing beneath his feet, he could soar through the air. Sure, sure, sure. Swift sounds shot through the air continuously and were extremely soft. Su Zimo might not have heard them if he hadn't cleared his ear orifices. The moment the floor slab beneath his feet sank in, a poison needle as thin as cow's hair shot up from the darkness below. It was the heart-seeking spike, one of Poison Sect's 7 lethals. With his spirit perceptions warning, Su Zimo had already activated his wings a moment earlier and charged towards Du Kai, who was in the depths of the hall. A blue heart-seeking spike brushed by Su Zimo, missing by a bare inch. At the entrance of the hall, many Poison Sect cultivators swarmed in, summoning their spirit weapons one after another. Most of the Poison Sect cultivators were using weapons that were extremely cunning. The only thing they had in common was that they were all coated with poison, reflecting in rainbow colors against the sunlight. In midair, Su Zimo slapped his storage bag. Buzz! 18 supreme-grade flying swords were summoned, buzzing and gleaming with spirit light as they emitted an endless sharpness. Swoosh! 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 Speeding through the air, the 18 flying swords left behind streams of sword chi that shone brightly. It was the candlelight sword formation. Su Zimo did not show any mercy at all. He started off right away with his strongest immortality cultivation killing move, the candlelight sword formation. Even if they did not form a sword formation, the power of 18 supreme-grade flying swords bursting forth together was already sufficiently terrifying, let alone the might of a sword formation. Now that Su Zimo was already at 6 Meridian Foundation establishment, the strength of the candlelight sword formation increased as well. Even ordinary 7 Meridian Foundation establishment cultivators wouldn't be able to withstand the killing might of the sword formation. The advantage of poison sect cultivators was in their usage of poisons. However, in terms of actual strength, they were similar to cultivators of ordinary sections. Go! Xuantian pointed forward and hollered softly. Right after, the 18 flying swords gathered together with their tips pointing outwards in unison, forming a gigantic, sword-shaped, circular disc. 18 rays of sword chi were released like a blazing sun and was extremely dazzling. The moment the sword formation entered the crowd, a gaping hole was formed. The strongest of the poison sect cultivators were only at 7 Meridian Foundation establishment. None of them could withstand the rush of the candlelight sword formation as a blood mist formed with broken limbs flying everywhere. Most of the poison sect cultivators had their lives hanging on a thread and could not spare any attention to deal with Xuantian. While releasing the candlelight sword formation, Xuantian withdrew a gigantic blood-colored saber from his storage bag that emitted a boundless might. Clang! Clang! The saber quivered, buzzing with a murderous metallic sound. In that instant, Xuantian had already lunged in front of Du Kai. Swinging blood quencher, he descended from the skies with a loud roar, "Die!" Chapter 403, Life Exchange. Chapter 403, Life Exchange. Du Kai was calm in the face of Xuantian's ferocious slash. With a flicker in his eyes, he retreated while flicking his sleeves, spreading a purplish-green powder towards the direction that Xuantian was arriving in. It was one of Poison Sect's 7 lethals, the Purple Corpse Corrosion Poison. Throughout history, there had been countless geniuses that were much stronger than Poison Sect cultivators of the same level. However, many of them died against the Purple Corpse Corrosion Poison as well. Each of the 7 lethals was made by crushing countless corpses and bones and was extremely notorious. Xuantian was fearless against any other poison. However, he did not dare to be careless against the Purple Corpse Corrosion Poison. He recalled the saber stance he had learned back in the Saber Mountain Spirit Sea and retracted his saber before slashing out again. Swoosh! The sound of a surging tide gushed forth from Blood Quencher's blade. A massive tsunami and a countercurrent force burst forth, as if a massive wave was about to crush down in a terrifying manner. How is that possible? Finally, Du Kai's expression changed as he exclaimed. While he did not recognize the origin of that saber technique, he could tell that Xuantian's attack had already surpassed the first mastery level in the way of the saber and was at the level of force. This was a level that most cultivators could not reach even if they spent their entire lives. Even if cultivators could comprehend the force, almost all of them were golden cores. On the one hand, it was because one would achieve indescribable wonders upon forming a core that was a state of returning to nature and simplifying everything. On the other hand, it was also because forming a golden core was equivalent to breaking free of the shackles of heaven and earth for the first time, allowing a cultivator to gain a lifespan of 500 years. A sufficiently long lifespan also meant that the cultivator would have more time and energy to spend on comprehending the Tao of Sabers, thus gaining enlightenment on the state of force. Of course, throughout history, there would always be cultivators in every generation who could manage to gain enlightenment of that level even at Foundation establishment realm. However, those cultivators were extremely rare, and each of them were the top paragons of their respective sections. This Xuantian that was before Du Kai was a nobody, a mere cultivator who had arrived from a remote place in Tianhuang mainland, and yet he managed to cultivate to that state. Against the countercurrent force, the Purple Corpse Corrosion Poison Powder was blown away completely, and there was not a speck to be found on Xuantian's body. Du Kai avoided that slash, and a look of fear flashed through his eyes. Xuantian was far scarier than he had imagined. On the other side, Candlelight Sword Formation spiraled on and had already sliced more than 100 poison sect cultivators into pieces. No one could even last a single round against the sword formation that was charging left and right. The Candlelight Sword Formation alone was enough to block the poison sect cultivators at the entrance. Although there were some spirit weapons that managed to get through, their impact towards Suzumo was almost negligible. Dukai found himself stuck in a situation where he was alone without reinforcements. After realizing the terror of Suzumo's strength, Dukai wielded daggers in each hand that shone with a faint green light. Instead of fighting Suzumo head-on, he was dodging repeatedly and sending out hidden weapons from time to time just to drag things out. On the surface, Suzumo was the one that was suppressing Dukai and had the advantage. However, in reality, their fight was extremely treacherous and shuddering. Dukai had hidden weapons everywhere, and he could throw out one of them that was coated with poison with every move. Every single portion of Dukai's body contained the possibility of a hidden weapon flying. In fact, even his hair could send forth heart-seeking spikes with a single fling, so it was almost impossible to defend against everything. Any other ordinary 7 Meridian Foundation establishment cultivator would have died multiple times during this period of time. However, Suzumo was able to suppress Dukai by relying on his spirit perception to avoid danger time and again. At the same time, Suzumo had something else in mind. Although he had memorized the 5 stances of sea calming, he was not too familiarized with the moves. Even Countercurrent, which he had managed to gain comprehension of its force, wasn't at a point where he could release it flawlessly. Since it was rare for him to meet with such an opponent, Suzumo had nothing else on his mind and was thoroughly immersed in practicing his Saber technique. Although sea calming seemed like it merely consisted of 5 stances, each stance possessed an endless secret to it, and one could even dissect it to 100 or 1,000 different stances. Apart from the final stance that he was still unable to produce, Suzumo practiced the first 4 stances one after another, becoming increasingly familiar with the Saber technique, increasingly sharper and increasingly natural. Dukai was now Suzumo's whetstone. In that period of time, the 100-odd poison sect cultivators were mostly done in by the candlelight sword formation, and the remaining cultivators escaped hurriedly. They hid outside the hall, watching from the darks. If Dukai won, they would enter at the appropriate moment. As such, they wouldn't be considered as deserters and wouldn't receive punishment. However, if Suzumo won, there was only a single word: escape. As time passed by, Suzumo's Saber technique became increasingly refined, flowing like fluid without any delays. He was no longer as amateurish as before. With that, it became increasingly difficult for Dukai to defend. Furthermore, what was the difference between Suzumo and Dukai's physique? Suzumo fought fiercer as the battle dragged on and was filled with energy. His bloodline churned within his body, surging faster and faster as the faint sounds of tsunami coupled with the surging tides of his Saber technique harmonized with one another. With a pale face, sweat was pouring down from Dukai's forehead, and he was panting. What a sicko! Dukai cursed internally. There was no way he knew that Suzumo was merely using him as a whetstone to refine his Saber techniques on. He thought that Suzumo was doing it on purpose to torment him endlessly, trying to wear him down by attrition. How bloody evil! Gritting his teeth, Dukai's eyes turned cold and his expression was malicious. The look in his eyes was turning more hysterical by the moment. Bloody hell! I'll fight you with everything. He heaved a deep breath of air and suddenly lunged towards Suzumo. Raising both daggers, he wielded towards the latter's throat. Spinning horizontally with his saber, Suzumo slashed against the 2 daggers and used vortex instinctively. A spiral energy burst forth instantly, and Dukai's daggers were sent flying as his palms split apart with blood oozing out. After vortex, Suzumo slashed in reverse like a ripple on the surface of the ocean. It swiped towards Dukai's chest in a seemingly gentle motion. Ripple stance. If Countercurrent represented might, Ripple represented tenderness. Seemingly gentle, it permeated every single pore as the Saber force pushed on relentlessly. It was almost impossible for anyone involved in it to escape, and it would eventually kill them. Dukai could not and did not want to avoid that slash. He was now completely maniacal as he rushed forward with complete disregard towards Suzumo's blood quencher. His eyes shone with wrath as he yelled, "Kill!" A sense of danger rang in Suzumo's mind. At that moment, Suzumo snapped out of his mechanical practice mode instantly. Dukai's hidden weapon was hidden in his mouth. The moment he opened his mouth, a chain of thin blue needles with a nauseating aura shot forth, almost suffocating Suzumo. It was a killing blow. That was also Dukai's killing move that was made in exchange with his own life. Although he had the warning from his spirit perception, Suzumo was immersed in his saber technique practice. By the time he snapped out of it, he was still a bit too late. You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.